I now call this June 15th, 2023 monthly meeting of the MRH Board of Education meeting to order at 7 p.m. Can you please join me in rising for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now move on to item 1.03, public comment. In preparation for public comment, I'd like to just outline our rules very quickly. Please keep your remarks to 3 minutes. We ask that you refrain from sharing personally identifiable information and confidential personnel matters about students or staff. Per policy, the board does not respond to individual public comments during the meeting. All speakers will receive a follow-up communication from the board within 72 hours of this meeting. Because of our large number of speakers tonight, and thank you, we are glad to see all of you here. Your enthusiasm and participation is welcome. We will need to be consistent about adhering to the 3-minute time limit. When your 3 minutes are up, Board Administrative Secretary Kat Norton will raise this red sign, and we ask that you please be respectful of your fellow speakers tonight by ending promptly when your time concludes. If the sign is raised and you're not concluding, I will prompt you verbally. Before we begin public comment, I just would like to correct some erroneous information that came forward during public comment at our last monthly meeting on May 18th. A statement was made that in-person exit interview slots for departing staff were completely full at the time of the board meeting. The board has received written exit survey forms and invitations to participate in an in-person meeting that were sent to departing staff. 30-minute in-person interviews were offered to all exiting staff, and those interviews were arranged individually based on the availability of the staff member and the HR representative, and were offered off-site at the staff member's location or at central office. There was no limit imposed on the number of interviews offered. With that, I'll ask that we begin. When I call your name, please come to the podium and introduce yourself, and we'll start the 3-minute timer. Kara Harlan. Janice Jackson.
My hearing's going, just so you know that, Kat, but I can still see the sign. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a long-standing member of the MRH community, and I remember when the district nearly lost accreditation. When I moved into this district, I had no intention of staying. I'm a voter and advocate who worked on numerous bond issues to facilitate the rise of this district. A trajectory that included hiring administrators who embraced a bold vision, who exercised the ability to recruit and retain quality teachers, developed and implemented programs that earned awards and recognition. I'm the proud parent of a graduate of MRH High School class of 2016, who has graduated from college, works in the area of his degree, and continues to cherish relationships he has with some of these high school teachers and coaches. These last 10 years after my own retirement from teaching, I frequently worked as a substitute teacher at the high school, working in special education classrooms and in collaborative settings of many current and now unfortunately former general education teachers. As a stakeholder of this community, I'm hoping the board addresses what is becoming obvious to those outside of the MRH community, and I'll get into that in a second. I'm not convinced that the leadership skills are in place that are necessary to address the current and future needs of the students and teachers. In fact, I've heard people describe the current environment as toxic. I do not say this lightly. I intended to write after I saw Facebook posts of the MRH school board meeting on May 18th. Pictures posted on the Facebook site from that evening stated the following, and I quote, "No fewer than 7 stakeholders signed up to speak in the public forum section at the top of the session. These included parents, students, and community members commenting on topics such as teacher retention, school start times, and trades education. Public forum is a key component." End of quote. However, the wording on that Facebook page did not convey what the speakers were trying to communicate to the board and to the audience. I listened to the audio of the speakers from that night, 3 students and a parent, who had the courage to call attention to the alarming loss of effective and respected teachers and the status of an apprenticeship program that does not offer what it claims to offer. Please assure me that these observations did not fall on deaf ears. I am hoping that the board realizes that there are many people that no longer consider this a destination school district, both for families and for teachers. I say this, let me get this one in. I had a brief but alarming conversation with 2 educators from other districts on Thursday, June 1st. I did not know them prior to this night, but we shared a table. Bottom line, these educators readily shared their dismay that MRH had lost highly regarded administrators, teachers, and support staff in alarming numbers. They believe the district is no longer able to attract the experienced and quality teachers it did in the past. They have high regard for the people who've left, and they shared that there's a prevailing attitude that MRH has devolved into a toxic and intimidating environment. And I will close with, we are on a very dangerous precipice here. And I can say that because I was here in 1991.
Mary Darst.
Good evening. Of my 46 years as an educator and school counselor, 30 plus were here in MRH, with 2 years at what was then A.B. Green and the rest at the elementary. So I was pretty disheartened to hear a former student of mine and her husband were reluctant to enter their children at ECC if the elementary wasn't going to be fit for them to continue their education there. And their question was, what's going on at the elementary? Why are so many teachers leaving? So that led me here tonight to share an insight I learned in Knoxville, Tennessee. I taught Algebra 1 for high school credit, by the way, and reading to 8th graders. One of my students and his younger brother needed immediate foster care. My husband and I were approved with an emergency clearance and fostered the boys. The younger brother had difficulty seeing how his decisions affected his outcomes. A counselor we worked with on the boy's behalf told him this: if 1 or 2 people tell you that you have a tail, you can laugh that off. If 10, 12, 14 people tell you you have a tail, you better turn around and look. So your collective decisions here have impacted your staff and in turn our MRH students. The recent staff departures of highly qualified, dedicated professionals cannot be written off as rumors, lies, and gossip. It's time for you as a board and the current administrators of each building to turn around and take a look.
Dan Lyons.
Good evening. MRH has always had a history of change, from the reimagining of a traditional school district, to the rebuilding of infrastructure, to the hiring of a diverse staff to fit that vision. Of course, these changes brought discontent. Teachers were fearful about pedagogical changes. The community was fearful of the innovative philosophies that MRH took on, and everyone was fearful of the unknown. What changed the perception of the community as a whole was the focus on relationship building between the administration and the community. But that took time. Today there are many parallels with those times in the past. A different administration, a new group of teachers, and an evolving vision. This reminds me of the early days of teaching here. And it's starting, and the familiar fear is also here. The administration is fearful of resistance from parents, teachers, students, and the community. The teachers are fearful that they will not be heard and actions will not be taken to their concerns. And parents are fearful that their children may not receive the same quality education as they always had. I'm here to tell you that it's going to be okay. We need to take a moment to reflect, to find ways together to continue to build the strongest MRH we can for our kids by forming common goals, assuming goodwill, and being proactive, not reactive. This past year, Dr. Jameson had put the time and energy into listening to us, but I can only speak to you about my own experiences. I work with Dr. Jameson and other teachers and administrators on the Compensation and Benefits Task Force. One specific issue was brought to the committee. It was around teacher sick leave, personal time. It was through these talks that Dr. Jameson that a positive change is being brought to the school board for consideration. At the elementary school, NEA members had certain questions. A survey was issued, and as a result, this was shared with Dr. Jameson. She met with a group for several hours to review the data and have conversations. Consequently, teachers shared that they felt they were being listened to because there was this open two-way communication. Dr. Jameson and I have also had one-on-one conversations. One example is a meeting I had at Central Office. Dr. Jameson asked me into her office as I was walking out, hopefully to get home early. We spoke for a long time, and part of this conversation was me sharing some very personal concerns I had. This would not have been something that I would have done earlier this year. But through this year, there has been an effort for communication between the teachers and her. I hope the coming school year we will continue to build trust on the development of our shared goals and be successful. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Melissa Foose, and I just completed my 13th year of teaching in the district. I also live here with my husband, and I have a rising 7th grader and a rising 9th grader. And I love MRH. I love that when we walk into the high school library, there's a sign that says read banned books. I love that when my oldest was at the ECC, he started picking up trash while we walked along the beach on a family trip because he had learned about the dangers of plastic on sea life. And when we drove through East St. Louis, he noticed that it was a food desert and asked why there were not more grocery stores. I love that my youngest felt safe enough in the school community to play a piano solo at a 6th grade promotion, and that he was able to feel so close to his teachers because of looping. I love that our children learn about gardens and bees and take trips beyond the walls of the classroom. I love that they're encouraged to create spaces and exhibits that inspire each other's learning. I love our metaphors. I love that during a Black History Assembly, when a brave and brilliant high school student was giving a speech and froze up, that her peers started clapping for her and encouraging her. I love that in the salutatorian's graduation speech, she said she has always felt safe in MRH to be her authentic self. I love the alternative programs in which I've spent the last 13 years working in. I love the way we get to wrap around our students and see them as whole people. I love serving on Joe's Place Board and the way we desire to provide safety to our most vulnerable students. I love picking up a WOW box each week that was packed by my students to deliver to our families who need extra support. I love my students and their unique paths and their resilience and their authenticity. I love our theater teacher, Holly Potoff, and her bravery for putting on plays that make us think. And I love that both of my boys still remember all the lessons Chef Marino taught them about nutrition and sustainability. I love that our school board supports initiatives around social justice, trans rights, and gun reform. I love that there's a high value placed on relationships, and that the goal and mission of our district seems to be focused around developing our students to be thoughtful humans instead of shiny data points. When you love something so much, you feel very defensive of it. You want to cling to the old ways and do what you've always done. I have certainly felt that. But the truth is, change is here. We are operating in a post-pandemic education world where what we did before is no longer good enough. We see that nationwide. Teachers are leaving the profession in unprecedented ways and reporting high levels of stress everywhere. It is heartbreaking and terrifying. I have friends who teach in a variety of settings of schools all across St. Louis, and the truth is a lot of schools are a mess right now. It is a very unsettling time. And I know that during unsettling times, it's hard to have a lot of leadership change. And at MRH, there has been a lot of that, and that anxiety can cause anxiety and fear. But what I've also learned in life is that when we feed into an anxiety and fear, it only grows. I am deeply hopeful that we can keep all the things we love about MRH and change in the ways we need to support all students and all staff, that we can do both. I've had the good fortune of working alongside Dr. Jameson. She possesses the skills, the passion, the bravery, and the vision to do this work. And we have an active and engaged community. MRH has deep roots and strong branches, but just like all strong trees, we need to change with the seasons. Here we are. Just think of what we could do if we all worked together, side by side, putting the very real problems in front of us instead of between us. Thank you.
Good evening, MRH Board, Dr. Jameson, Central Office staff, colleagues, and community. I am Tanisha Stansel, Assistant Principal at the ECC. I was ready to resign from this position in September. I had never considered resigning from a position in the middle of the year, let alone when the year first started. What has been my experience here? A toxic, hostile work environment with little hope of professional growth in my position. I am here to call out the microaggressive racism that occurs amongst adults in this district, threatening the success of our students. Frederick Douglass, a civil rights leader, stated, "If there is no struggle, there is no progress." And what is our struggle? Change and accountability. As an administrator of this district, all year we have been discussing the reasoning behind the urgency of these changes. And as the state shifts to increase accountability, we cannot stay in the status quo. I have felt and observed the blatant silencing and attacks on those who speak out and bring change to the district. There is one thing in common: speaking out and being in the minority. Because in this, it appears it is not necessarily what the district is asking us to do, but who is actually making that request. And so how does the district expect to move all students, including those in the minority, when adults are resistant to change and accountability? As a district, we need to become effective at responding to microaggressive racial attacks because those who identify other than the majority are silenced. So I bring a few solutions. 1, support district-wide, non-negotiable, ongoing work in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And 2, review, revise, and strengthen the code of conduct for staff and families to include policies to protect those who experience hostile work learning environments and or microaggressions across the community. I support the work of Dr. Jameson. Her central office team is trying to facilitate in this district. There are many high leverage issues that need to be reviewed, revised, and created for MRH to be at its highest potential. I encourage the board to reclaim your time with issues that center around who is benefiting from the complaints of changes. If the answer is anything but student-centered, it is simply a waste of your valuable time. I will no longer be silent. I look forward to being a part of the change in race relations at MRH, only to attack the issues that we face to help us evolve. not the people. Our students deserve the best we can provide. Feel free to contact me if you have further questions, concerns, or need clarification. Thank you for allowing me to put my voice in this space.
Minnie Durham. Keith Moylan.
Hello, I'm Heath Moylan. I have 3 kids in the district, and today I'm reading a letter that was signed by now 180 people in the community, and we'll get right to it since we're short on time. The recent mass departures of teachers and staff in our district is nothing less than a crisis. Much attention has been paid to 10 out of 24 of our core elementary school teachers leaving, but we have lost a startling number of key leaders, teachers, and staff all across the district. We have lost over 140 years of teaching and admin career experience at the high school alone. We have lost 2 current teachers of the year. The quantity and quality of staff members we have lost vastly exceeds anything we have seen in this district in decades. Such a massive amount of experience and institutional knowledge walking out of the door means that terrible damage has already been done to our district, and perhaps, more importantly, to the fabric of our community. It will take years to repair and hopefully, eventually heal without permanent scars. After a full year of discussions with past and present staff, the superintendent, and numerous board members on this matter, 2 things are abundantly clear. Serious problems with our top leadership, starting with the superintendent, are a major factor driving the talent loss. And 2, our board has failed to recognize or address that fact in any meaningful way. We have read and listened to many responses and explanations from this board and administration, but all have been inadequate or even misguided. First, the serious concerns we are raising today do not in any way conflict with or minimize goals that this board and district have set around DEI and addressing achievement gaps across the student population. These have always been goals of ours. They are difficult yet important problems to solve, but the loss of so much talent and experience among staff is a massive setback to those same objectives. We do not fear or resent change. And we are aware that MRH constantly faces shortcomings and challenges that it must rise and adapt to. And we understand that change can be difficult and messy. However, we see no evidence that we are on a positive path that would remotely justify the losses we have sustained. While the board has considered and addressed many valid issues affecting employee morale and retention, the role and accountability of the superintendent have not been adequately considered, and this ignores the heart of the problem. The board must recognize and acknowledge how devastating these staff losses are to our kids and to our community. The board must recognize and respond to the prominent role our superintendent has played in this failure. We must send a clear message that the losses we have experienced are entirely unacceptable and quickly find a path to recovery, and we must all work to rebuild trust between parents, teachers, students, and our elected and unelected leaders. And I'll just close by saying I love the same things about the district that a lot of you have talked about. I care about the same problems that a lot of you care about. But I don't see how we get there when we are losing so many great people. And I have talked to many of them, and I've heard their words directly from their mouths to my ears, and I know what they're saying. Thank you.
Naomi Warren.
My name is Naomi Warren. I'm the social worker at the middle and high school, and I'm also a parent of 2 students at MRH. Prior to coming on as a full-time employee, I had the opportunity to work with MRH as a consultant through NCCJ St. Louis. Shortly after the board unanimously approved the resolution on educational equity and social justice, Dr. Karen Hall invited NCCJ to do equity onboarding for the district. The sincere commitment of Dr. Hall and so many of the staff who participated in our trainings was inspiring. I knew then that MRH was a special place. Several years later, I had the good fortune of being hired by Dr. Grauer and Dr. Dietrich, both of whom I've appreciated working alongside. I have also appreciated the opportunities I have had to work with Dr. Jameson, who I have found to be committed, capable, and courageous. She has helped build structures and systems to the district, has held us to high standards, and has demanded accountability. The last few years have been turbulent, not only at MRH, but in public school districts across the country. Staff turnover is a national crisis. That is a problem, however, that cannot be laid solely at the superintendent's feet. In fact, I'm proud and appreciative of the work Dr. Jameson and this board have done to increase staff compensation, starting with increasing the minimum wage for support staff to $15 an hour, then providing pay increases to teachers between 8 to 10%, and then extending similar increases to nurses and social workers. One of the principles of my work in training and intergroup dialogue is to find common ground. I believe there is a common ground among unsettled members of the community and the MRH Central Office administrators. I believe that staff retention is one such area of common ground. I also believe that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. We are truly in this together. I hope that all of us who feel committed to the students at MRH will find ways to work through the challenges we face rather than turning against one another. Thank you.
Hey y'all. So I'm gonna go off of the main topic. I am here to talk with y'all and ask you all to please reconsider the time that y'all have at the ECC for next year. It is going to be a serious hardship for a lot of parents. I think that we could probably work around getting our babies there and the start time being 7:40, but the 2:30 is what is difficult for us. 2:30 is really the middle of our work day, and as you all know, the ECC building has our youngest babies in the district. So it's not like they can walk home by themselves. It's not like they can be at home by themselves. We need to, their parents or guardians, whoever needs to pick them up and watch over them. And then you already know, because we've been working on this for years as a district, right? Trying to find spots for before care and after care for our babies. I think we're gonna have more of an issue when we change this and you're asking us to get our babies at 2:30. You all know, well, I hope you do, but I'll say it. I do not look at y'all like our schools or daycare, because they are absolutely not. I think, though, we do need to work hand in hand on at least making sure that our youngest can be taken care of after school, and it's not so much of a hardship on them and their parents. So yeah, that's what I came to say, but I just want you all to know that it's hard. I know it's hard. It's been hard since 2020, and I appreciate y'all. You all do not get paid. You volunteer because of your love of our students and our district. I see that. I recognize that. I appreciate that. To Central Office, thank you. Just briefly, when Dr. Jameson came on, I complained to her about books. I love books. And I told her, we were told, board member Herndon Miller and I, when I was serving on the board, we were told that readers that our babies would get in the ECC, they weren't available as far as like multicultural readers or readers with like the main character being a handicap. And then I talked to you months later, my baby came home with a reader that had 5 different children that had that were living with their disabilities, and it was a happy story. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I appreciate you for listening. I appreciate you for acting. Dr. Phillips, I appreciate what you're doing. I know that HR had a lot of things that needed to be put in order and created, and you're doing that work. Thank you very much. Dr. McGee, thank you for the vision that you have in creating the curriculum that our children are going to get. I can't say it enough. And then, Chris, thank you, because you always watch our money. I appreciate you for that too. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Samuel Knapper.
Hello, I'm an educator, and I have 2 children who attend elementary and ECC, and I'm really directly responding to that letter that was written up here earlier. Teacher retention is a nationwide epidemic. It is by no means something that is just affecting MRH. And to put so many potential things that aren't supported by any other data as being indicative of teachers leaving a district, it's not supported with the data. You know, absent from that letter, there's no mention of graduation rates, of college acceptance rates, of scholarships attained, or average test scores. It's just about teachers going. There's no mention of did they transfer within the district, did they retire. It is purely based on anecdotes. It's just anecdotal evidence that is cited. And that's a dangerous place to be making decisions because essentially you're making decisions from a position of fear. It also mentions diversity, equity, and inclusion and gaps, achievement gaps of student population. But it's as if it's attributing teachers leaving because of these policies. It just kind of comes out of nowhere in the second bullet point in that letter. I don't understand how that came through. Also notably absent on that letter of the signatures that I recognized, there's no households with people of color represented on that letter. And when you're talking about student achievement gaps, that's who's being impacted. And I find that somewhat distressing too. Thinking that we need to go to a prior status quo by making sure we retain all of our teachers, it's pure fear. And there's nothing else there that's supporting that this is a huge crisis and that this is being caused by what's listed in the letter. Making decisions like this, it's right for mistakes, and there are many households that would be disserved, and there are ones that traditionally have been disserved by public education in the past.
Ashley Metcalf.
Hello. I'm Ashley Metcalf. I am a MRH mother, 2 kids in the district. I'm also a leader in the community. I have lived my life in Richmond Heights, and I chose to move my family here mainly because of the school district. We chose MRH as our school actually after we had already started paying tuition to a private school for my oldest, and we chose MRH because we toured the school. We got to know the teachers at the ECC, and then we went to a board meeting where they acknowledged that they support the teachers and the community and the culture that we had decided was right for our family. So that was a choice that we made. In the last year, the trust that we have come to understand from the MRH community has been eroded. I could cite a number of reasons, but I have 3 minutes and hone in on one specific issue because of brevity. The issue I take with this leadership team is the issue surrounding culture. It's already been addressed here tonight, but I feel it needs to be reiterated. The loss of an extraordinary amount of key teachers and staff, and they were instrumental in the leadership of our culture and our education. The loss of those people, coupled with the knowledge and yes, the culture that just walked out the door with them is catastrophic, and it makes parents nervous about what is to come. And I want to be clear about this. Change is not the issue. And I know that that has been a fear that's been relayed to us here tonight by another speaker. Change is not the issue. MRH has gone through many changes. It's the reason for the change and the drastic change that has caused the nervousness. Yes, we do need to have a common goal, and yes, we do need to celebrate the wins, as one other speaker said earlier tonight, and small victories do matter. But we are in a very scary state, and the major issue of the exiting and of the tenured staff that decided that this school was headed in the wrong direction is a problem that is not being addressed. It's a small school district. We know why people are leaving. When you make a decision that the structure and the culture that has been built is no longer what you want, which is very much what at least I understand to be true, it begs the question of why. That's a question for the board. Feel free to address in your email. And I'll tell you where this analysis comes from. I had the chance to sit down with the superintendent and discuss her motivations, her assumptions, and her opinions. And in this meeting, she told me that the culture is built from the bottom up. I have many thoughts about this theory and where it comes from, but to keep it brief, I disagree that the school would benefit from a bottom-up culture theory. It's not exactly a strategy that works for most companies, let alone schools. 2, allowing a bottom-up culture methodology to exist requires the existence and retention of people who exemplify the MRH way. The vast exiting of people who exemplify this culture and this mission is concerning, and I ask the board to take action to understand why and also to solution the problem. Thank you.
That concludes our public comment for tonight. I would like to thank all of tonight's speakers for sharing your perspectives. Your time here tonight together demonstrates your shared objective to make MRH the best possible district for all students and staff. The differing viewpoints presented about how we collectively achieve that outcome demonstrates the complexity of the board's responsibilities. These are responsibilities we take very seriously. All of us on this board have children or grandchildren in this district. While I appreciate that it can be frustrating not to have visibility into our work regarding confidential personnel matters, we have created board accountability measures for staff retention, climate and culture, student achievement, and student and staff wellness as part of the new strategic plan that we are approving tonight. We are reviewing feedback and data currently at tonight's meeting and throughout the summer to inform our actions related to those issues. We will continue to make that work visible to you through our follow-up to tonight's speakers, board docs, board committees, and the board's community engagement plan. As I shared with the open letter petitioner via email on Monday, per the Missouri Department of Elementary and Secondary Education's superintendent evaluation protocol and timeline, the board evaluated Dr. Jamieson and approved her contract extension in April. This action does not indicate that we do not incorporate your feedback into our decision making, and we are already engaged in responding to many of the concerns that were shared with us this evening. This is work that will involve building level administrators, teachers, families, and students. I encourage you all, if you are able to stay for the remainder of our meeting, we will be discussing climate and culture data, student discipline data, extracurricular opportunities, the board's community engagement plan, and student representation on the board. Thank you again for joining us. We'll now move us on to item 2.01, approval of the consent agenda. Motion?
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Item 3.01, construction change orders.
Okay, well, we'll start off with construction change orders. We have just a few things this time. Change order number 33. We had some water damage down in the cooler room and the kitchens, some electrical changes. One of the things that we've struggled with as we design our spaces is electrical outlets ending up on the same place that we would put a desk or a cabinet, which makes the electrical outlet just useless. So we took the additional step to try as hard as we can to keep that from happening. So we're moving some stuff around so that we don't block those outlets, both data and electric. Added a door frame down by the gym. Had to provide heat to a heat pump that we had to move, roof drain. This is all exciting stuff, I know. Relocated a water line that was in the way of some ductwork in the new choir room that I'm excited for you all to see when it opens. And clear some existing bushes down here for the new landscaping. So all said and done, these change orders impact the budget $26,744.99.
Questions on this item? All right, we'll go ahead and fold into 3.02, water service line and sewage.
Moving from one exciting topic to the next. So part of the construction project is a new 8-inch combination fire suppression domestic water line. The district now is being served on very much less than that. So in order to accomplish this goal, a Missouri American Water certified plumbing contractor certified for large connections must do the work. They have to collaborate with Missouri American Water, which has been an interesting and learning experience for me. The bids were opened this morning via Zoom. It's a public opening. We did have 2 submissions. The winner, by way of matrix, the matrix results there in the board agenda, was Merlot Plumbing. Their proposal was the most complete, comprehensive, itemized all of the various pieces of the project, including the collaboration with the Missouri American Water. This is not an inexpensive prospect, but it is necessary. $164,394 to do this work. So later this evening, we'll be asking the board to approve this so that we can sign it and get it out the door. There is a 12-week lead time currently on the meter vault, which is a 17 by 7 cast concrete box that will be installed into the ground. Weighs 48,000 pounds. Part of the cost is related to the crane that will have to set that meter vault. It takes 12 weeks to get it, so we need to get that moving as soon as we possibly can.
So we foresee that this will be being done at the start of the school year.
Well,
how does that
when
impact
else?
that?
When else would we do this?
Thank you for providing the matrix. That was really helpful.
My pleasure.
And Chris, is this one of those things that we just didn't know we were going to need before we started digging into the ground?
No, this has been a planned portion of the project all along. The piece that I think caught some of us off guard, me included, I'll just admit that, was all of these water connections are the responsibility of the owner. So that is the component that I've learned, but it was built into the budget. So it was an item that was planned. It's just who was doing the legwork on getting this work assigned was not known. Now I know.
No questions? Move on to 3.03, bus routes with Dr. Dietrich.
So if you look in the agenda, so every year DESE requires us to approve our bus routes twice. Found that was very interesting. We approve our bus routes prior to September, but then when the school year is over, we have to approve them again in June. So I learned that after I hurried up and got all the bus routes done for next year, so I thought that's what we were approving tonight. But if you look in your study items, you actually have the routes for this year that need to be approved for the second time. And we already have our routes and the study items for this coming year, so that you can look at those as well. I will tell you in the study items, looking at the routes, if you look at the 23-24, we have already stacked those routes. What that does is it decreases the number of drivers we need each day. We still need drivers, but it really allows us to be more nimble, have more buses in the afternoon, for our activities. I know that was a big concern in the community with having transportation for games, transportation for practices. I really foresee it being a very positive thing as we move into next school year. That our routes will be much more productive and serve our students better. Any questions?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
3.04, student activities with Mr. Davenport.
We'll be able to preview the slides.
I'm working on it.
The smart word isn't very smart.
I'm Rashad Davenport, Athletic Director here at McWood Richmond Heights. Tonight I'm going to propose 2023-24 proposals for the upcoming year in the area of athletics and activities. The theory of action for the athletics department intends to outline outcomes for the program based on the actions of the athletic director and those who support the program. I truly believe that if we invest in high school athletics, then we will foster student engagement, promote physical and mental well-being, enhance academic achievement, and strengthen our school community. High school level play a crucial role in promoting physical fitness, teamwork, discipline, and overall well-being among students. Numerous studies have examined the benefits of sports and activities, and they are listed here. Physical fitness and health, academic performance, character development and life skills, social, emotional well-being, college and career readiness opportunities. Now the last piece, when we think about athletics and we think about sports, many of us think about having scholarships to Division I schools that we possibly see on TV. But just recently, the other day, I got a text message from one of our coaches who stated that our manager for the basketball program was going to get a scholarship to participate at Jackson State. Not to be an athlete, but to be a manager. So I just want to make sure that we all have an opportunity to understand that sports open up a variety of avenues for our students. The survey results being presented were collected by our previous administrators in October of 2023. So I'll give you a minute to look here. As you can see, there were 344 of our students took the survey. This was last October, so this will be our current high school students, 9 through 12, our incoming 9th graders on up to 12th grade. This survey depicts our student participation from MRH youth sports in grades 8 to our grades 12. As you can see, 60% of our students surveyed participate in a sport or activity through either MRH high school or MRH youth sports. So when we look at that 40%, I would be interested to see how they're connected to our community and see how their grades and attendance and discipline are versus our students who are participating in programs and activities here at the high school. This slide here indicates that 79% of our students had an interest, there was a sport or activity that was an interest that was already here at the high school. This survey here details participation for the upcoming school year. Our largest, the areas that had the largest interest were boys soccer, girls soccer, our boys track team, girls track team. And then we also have speech, theater, and our music activities combined all together, which also represent a large group of our students. Student survey interest here. This is we surveyed our students in interest in the area of football. It's important to know that in 2021, 2022, we sent this survey out and we had 10 students who were interested. This survey was done last year, and as you can see, though it's not disaggregated by gender, we have 102 students who are interested in football. This survey was given about boys volleyball. As you can see, we have 69 students, which equates to about 20% of our student population who are interested in boys volleyball in the spring. This survey talks about girls tennis. So those of you who didn't know, we had a co-ed team this year, and so they participated in the spring season with our boys, and we had a pretty good year for us to be our first year for boys tennis and our co-ed team as well. This student interest survey depicts the area of girls golf, which is in the fall. As you can see, we had 7% of our students who are interested in girls golf. And this survey here is for girls wrestling. So we had 5.7% of our students who are interested in girls wrestling, though we did have a few girls who participated in practice with the boys, so there is an interest in our girls wrestling program, which also happens to be one of the faster growing sports in the United States in high school. Here is a current offering of the sports and activities we offer by gender. As you read through them, you can see that there are slightly a couple more options for boys. So one of the things we want to do is make sure that we're offering enough sports for everyone to feel safe and they can participate in sports and activities that they like. So I would like to recommend the following. I would like to recommend for us to have a co-op with UCity schools. The co-op would include football. It would also include boys and girls swimming and diving. As you can see here, the required resources, you look at, as you go over to the right, you can see the cost. The main cost for football will be the uniforms, and that's the jersey and the pants, both home and away. When you look at the cost for the swim and dive team, those are personal items, so students will be responsible for those. And then the other recommendations would include boys volleyball, which happens in the spring. You can see the cost breakdown. The first cost is for a head coach, of course. We need a coach to coach the team. Then there's uniforms, in which we surveyed a few different places and got some quotes. The volleyballs, and then the actual initial registration fee that we would have to pay in order to sign our school up to participate in volleyball. And then lastly, we would like to add girls wrestling. Girls wrestling is a unique ad because it's an ad, but it's in addition to girls wrestling. The girls wrestlers travel with the boy wrestler team, and so if there are girl wrestlers that are available to wrestle at other schools, then they will wrestle. The cost here is for a girls wrestling tournament, which would only be the girls wrestling team participating. As far as uniforms go, the singlets fit both male and female. There is a bylaw in MISHA that allows the female to wear undergarment if they feel like they need to. Any questions?
Can you talk to us about the transportation cost for the co-op?
Yes. So
why that's zero?
Yes, it's zero. So UCity's going to help us out with the transportation costs. The good thing too is that the practice doesn't start until 3:45. So not only would our students not miss any time here, they wouldn't miss that much time of practicing.
So is the coach being supplied by UCity as well?
The coach is actually being applied by UCity, yes. Yes.
Are they covering the cost?
I'm sorry. This is important.
I'm sorry. I had my teacher hat on.
But Mr. Davenport is available by email as his report. Sorry, we can't take comment from the public now.
Of the things that are the co-op, are those, are there going to be tryouts? Do our kids, they're going to be competing against the UCity kids, and are they going to be cut? Like what?
So the way the co-op works is that they would be held at the same standard as UCity. So if it is a sport that requires a tryout, then they will have to try out for their particular position. But they would have a fair opportunity and a fair shot, like any other student who would participate in football.
And I know
that swimming.
And I know we have a dive swim interest in our community, but we didn't survey it. Have we asked how many I think we have a good group of kiddos, students that dive and swim, but I'm just curious.
And that's something we can definitely look into. I do know that we did have a Division I diver swimmer who committed to Lindenwood this year. So it's definitely interest in our community for it.
I can also add that we surveyed through the previous athletic director for the 21-22 school year, and there was a high interest for swim and dive. At the time when we were prioritizing adding activities for last year, pole vaulting and the co-ed tennis team was a priority based on the interest that we received from the previous survey. So it wasn't included here. We looked at previous surveys in addition to the one that was completed, which Mr. Davenport referenced with the 10 students for football.
I have just some slightly more global questions and comments. I appreciate that your title is athletic director, and I also see the inclusion in some places of our music and arts and other performance opportunities, but not consistently. I'm curious if this is going to be, I'm curious about the consistency with which we are communicating to our students the value of both aspects. And again, that may be a question for you, that may be a question for high school administration more broadly. So I'll stop that question there.
Well, and I think what would help support that would be simply adding activities, athletics and activities director. We do value our activities such as our choral, our music groups, our band. We value all of the speech and debate, who's actually traveling right now in a national tournament. So we do value all of our students.
And there's also a revised job description that's coming, and it also states athletic and activities director. And so each bullet point under that responsibility also communicates that, and the board will see that information later.
That is helpful. Again, going back to slide 7, the student survey participation, I really acknowledge that our high school students are some of the most overscheduled kids in the region. The fact that we can run the number of programs that we do, both in athletics and everything else, is, an incredible feat on their time management skills. I am curious if going forward we might be able to see some comparison of the student survey and interest with the actuals, going forward. I think it's easy to say, yes, I would plan to participate in all of these things, but, I don't know, do we have 41 students currently in esports? I know it's big. I don't know if it's that big, sort of thing. And so just, again, some curiosity about how interest translates into actuals. Just a request going forward, so wherever that goes.
I have a question. So what league or, I guess,
class
or whatever would the football be? Like who would they play against?
So we would be in class 4. So UCity right now is class 3, and they're kind of teeter-tottering between 3 and 4. So with the addition of our population, that will put us with class 4.
And do we have a marching band? Would there be a marching band?
You said would there be a marching band?
UCity. Yeah. Does UCity have a marching band?
UCity does have a marching band.
Would our students have an opportunity to be part of that?
That's something I could definitely we can visit. We can definitely visit.
And what would the mascot be?
So the mascot would still represent University City, since they are the hosting school. When you do the co-op, the hosting school kind of takes the bearer of responsibility on a lot of those things.
I'd like to also add the generosity of University City. We have seen previous plans to co-op with neighboring districts, and the cost was upwards of $40,000 for the 10 students that we looked at in the 21-22 school year. So the cost that's being outlined there is really to give our students an opportunity based on my lunch, chewing chats with kids who are saying that these are interests for them. And also Mr. Steve in our community, every time I see him, asks about football. So it's a great way to start some programming and offer opportunities as we continue to grow athletics, the arts, so that students have a way to belong. So I'm excited about the potential of this partnership.
So when you say typically a co-op would run us $40,000, UCD is essentially giving up potential revenue in order to include us in their activities.
That is correct.
Chris, may I ask, you feel pretty confident about the budget on this?
I do now. I was a little taken aback at the numbers, but I think the generosity of U-City, just to echo what Dr. J said, is really allowing this to be possible. These are not large ads.
Well, we appreciate the negotiating skills of Mr. Davenport and Dr. Jameson and making that arrangement. I think that's going to be a really significant value add to our students.
Thank you.
Item 5, Board Policy BDDH and KC. This is our third read of these policies.
Good evening, board, community, colleagues. Before we get started, just want to highlight a couple things. Thank you for those community members who took time to provide feedback to policy BDDH and policy KC. I enjoyed reading the comments and also reviewing the questions that were asked. So a couple things to lift out before we get started. Policy BDDH is not a new policy. This policy has actually been in place since 1998 and was last revised in 2004. So just to give you an idea, and I'll talk a little bit further about this, state statutes, sometimes when those come about for the revisions, require us to revisit particular board policies, and this would be an example of such. So it's not a new policy, we're not removing a policy, this policy has been in place for quite a bit. So I want to start off here, just kind of highlighting a few pieces as we talk about the policy that's being highlighted. So section 162.058 actually caused us to bring this policy back and to have this policy adopted by July 1st. The reason this particular policy came back is that they wanted to have feedback from the community in regards to this particular policy. Again, not a new policy, modifications to the policy that was already adopted by MRH Board of Education. So I wanted to spend some time to talk about the adoption process and also to highlight that this is not a new process that the board has engaged in. The policy BF outlines how we adopt policies. So I'll briefly go over that information with you. So policy proposals. This is when a new law, a state statute is revised that comes about, prompts us to actually have to revisit policies that are already on the books. You also can have policies initiated by members of the board, which we've seen in the past with some modifications of our policies around gender identity and some of those things. Another one would be one that will be presented after this one, looking at adding students to the board, which will be policy JFBB. So once those policies come about, depending on where it's actually derived, MSBA, which is the Missouri School Board Association, will send us a draft of the policy. So that policy, one of the questions that I received was, why does the policy have strike-throughs? Because MSBA actually provides that information to us and anyone else who uses their services. So there aren't many differences in the policies received. And we have the ability through conversation, and I'll talk a little bit about that, to make adjustments to the policy sent. So once those policies are received, individuals have an opportunity to engage. And so MSBA tells us who should actually be a part of reviewing the policies. So if it's a policy that impacts schools, that's the closest person to that particular policy, it will say school nurses need to review the policy. If it's building principals, it will say building principals and so forth. So policies are reviewed, we receive feedback, and then adjustments are made. That information is then brought to the board for the board to review, which is part of this process that you're seeing playing out now. So for this particular policy, we're looking at it a third time because we need to make adjustments based on the feedback that those who completed the survey provided. So once it goes through the first read, the second read, adjustments are made, the board then adopts the policy. That information is then sent to MSBA to make the changes. That information is posted on our district website, and then it's disseminated through our communications department in the newsletter, and also posted under the new board policies. So that's how the policies come about. So what does this particular policy say we have to do? So it says that we have to allow any resident, and one of the questions that were received was, how are we identifying residents? So this is not defined by MRH board, it is not defined by Dr. Jameson, it is actually defined by statute and the state. So resident is defined as a person who's domiciled in the district. That means if you own a home in the district, or if you have a student who's in the district who's court appointed, then that student will be considered a resident, and also the person who is providing care. This also includes anyone who is identified as McKinney-Vento, and that will be students who are unhoused or in transition or couch surfing. So with this particular policy, it does say resident. I'll talk about the ability to still have items added to the agenda, as well as having public comment. Those are two separate entities which are currently still in our board policy. So with the outline of actually what's here, there are certain components that have to be included. So the first one is no item shall be placed unless the item is directly related to governance or operation. So a lot of the things that individuals are asking, the board designates to the superintendent in his or her cabinet to carry those pieces out. But what do you ask is the responsibility of the board. So governance will be approval of policies, that's an example of such, or approval of the strategic plan, which is actually coming later today. Also, operational items, which some of you may be a participant of, the calendar committee, the board approves the calendar, budget approval, which you heard Mr. Hoser present earlier, and then also changes to transportation, which was previously presented by Dr. Dietrich. And so those are things that fall under that particular item. The second component of this particular statute says that the district can require residents to first meet with the superintendent. And as I was unpacking some of the feedback, which I'll share a little bit later from the survey, I went to look at another board policy. So policy KL talks about resolving conflict or concerns that surface from the public. So this particular policy is not a new policy. This policy was implemented, first adopted by the board in 1999, revisited again in 2018. So this particular policy has always detailed out how resolution is to come about. So for example, if you have a child and there's a concern with the classroom teacher, you would first start with the classroom teacher. If you don't seek resolution, then the person would have conversation with the principal. If the principal does not resolve the issue, then the community member resident is to reach out to the superintendent and so forth. So that particular policy is not new, but they are now looking at how to streamline to ensure that there is community engagement. The third component is looking at a reasonable rule for adding the agenda items. So MSBA provided the guidance for that. So just want to be very clear that is not language that the board created. And so if you look at other school districts, you will find that there are commonalities because we use the same entity to develop policies. So one of the questions, and I'll go back to that, was why are we saying 20 days to add an agenda item? It is a laborious process. It's not just adding an item, and also items have to be posted and agendas released in enough time to allow the board to review those items. In addition, it allows the board to ask questions, and I'll detail that a little bit further. And then the last component is why a board member would refuse to hear or delay an item that has already been presented. Great question that was posed. The why is around continuous improvement. So when we talk about the strategic plan and continuous improvement, we want to give time for the administration, building principals to A, implement whatever feedback that we get, which is input, and then also to look at the output, meaning the results of the change. It doesn't happen overnight, so we do have time for that. And then also to observe that data as we continue to see if the changes are made. So one of the pieces of this particular statute, as indicated, is that we needed to receive feedback from the community. While I know we have a highly engaged community, we had 19 participants out of our population to complete the survey. So here's what you told us. So we broke the survey up into appreciate and beneficial, and then also needs improvement. So here are the things that you appreciated about board policy BDDH. Citizens can submit action items. Believe it or not, our current policy BDDH allows residents to add agenda items to the agenda. Not new, no removal for transparency purposes. This has been there. The other piece, the board being open to hearing comments from the community, being asked opinions, and then also being able to hear from the rest of the community. So this feedback was loaded straight from the feedback from the survey, which is also linked to the board agenda item. Now here are the things you said we need to consider. The process seems confusing and cumbersome. Was repeated feedback limits this to issues. I do want to clarify that agenda items that are requested are not just for issues. You can come and have a great suggestion, as one of our presenters shared during public comments, solutions to address challenges. So it isn't necessarily a grievance. You can bring any item. If you want to add a dog walking park, you can. So there's no limit. You just have to monitor which items are actually added because they have to align to governance or operation as indicated before. The other piece that was highlighted was provides the board with significant discretion whether or not to hear items. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as I talk about the questions that are answered. Another needs improvement was the board refusing to add or delay items. And I want to be clear that it's not that they're refusing, it is if it's an item that's already been previously submitted. So that's to eliminate redundancy. The other areas that I wanted to lift out, opportunity for improvement to the presented is not defined as grievance. And then the other two that I thought were compelling was the comment around comments being filtered through the superintendent. I would love to unpack that a little bit more to further understand. And then there was an ask to include the board members' phone numbers and emails in the policy. So as you can imagine, each election, there's a new board member. You don't typically put the names of individuals in policy. So even if you were to look at a policy associated with human resources, it does not include Dr. Amber Stillup's name. It has the title only. Comments and questions that were actually lifted. So I'll leave those there. There were 3 that I wanted to make sure that I got to. Why is the policy being deleted? As mentioned before, it's not being deleted. It is being revised as a result of a change or revision of state statute. Does the Board of Education no longer encourage concerns? The answer to that would be they love concerns, and you do have an ability to do that during public comment, and that has also been in place prior in the board policy BDBH. And then the last question I wanted to address, which was included, why can't duplicate items be brought up within a 3-month window? Again, you have to allow the time for continuous improvement to see if the things that are implemented are actually working so that you can respond to the data. In regards to board policy KC around community feedback, a few of the items that were highlighted as appreciated or beneficial were citizens can add action items. The board is easy to reach. The importance of community engagement. The board is still open to hear comments. And then also some of them you can see were duplicated from some of the other policy that was brought forward. What needs improvement? So the emphasis placed on the word resident and citizen. So I wanted to differentiate between the two because the current board policy requires and allows the ability for residents. And so the delineation between the statute is that if you want to put an action item, you do have to be a resident as outlined in the definition that I shared. But citizens, you still can put items on public comment. You do not have to be a resident to do that. And that information is already included in the board policy. Other items that I want to lift out, expected time to get a response from the board. I do plan to have conversation with the Board of Education. Ms. Amber Withicum already shared that 72 hours for response for those who spoke today. Another I want to lift out is making the process more public and easily available to the agenda item to the board meeting. So I want to keep in mind that there is a difference between policy and procedure. So this is the policy, but the procedure details out how that's to actually happen, and that information will be updated. The board doesn't approve procedures, they approve policy. And the other item that was listed was requiring a meeting with the superintendent 20 business days. And the last item was community engagement aspect of the Board of Education needs major improvement. And here are some of the comments that were shared, and also a few questions. So just want to lift out a few. One that I thought was interesting to share was school board needs to be more conservative and not jump on the bandwagon for every new woke idea. Also, other items shared, why does the MRH policy say the item will be added to the next Board of Education agenda if received within 10 business days. So the cycle of placing, or the cadence of placing an item on the board, again, is not as simple as people think. So for this particular board meeting on the Thursday, the agenda items by my cabinet have to be loaded by Thursday because I meet with the board president and vice president to review those items for modification, and then from feedback from the community, if there are items to be added, those items are added as a result of the feedback. When those items are added or if modifications are made, myself or members of my cabinet have to go and create those presentations, add those items, I review them, give feedback for change, so it's not as simplistic as it appears. So it is a process that requires time and care and ensuring that we're communicating to the board and the community accurate and timely information. Other items I wanted to lift out, I addressed the information being crossed out, as well as does the Board of Education no longer encourage district patrons to express their ideas and concerns. And I would say that I've worked with many boards, and our board is very open to listening to concerns. So again, thank you for your feedback. So here are the things that I walked away with and potential changes that I'm recommending to the board. So modify the 20 business days to calendar days. I'm being very transparent. That is a heavy lift, depending on the number of items that are added to that board agenda. So now that would be a shift in order to give time for patrons who are interested in adding agenda items will have the ability to do that. We'll talk a little bit later about the Board of Education engagement activities, but another recommendation would be to publicize those in the newsletter, the website, and any other platforms that the district utilizes. And then the other two pieces are identify and publicize reasonable timeframes for responses to the public. And then the last one is to research and review current policies in other districts regarding the Board of Education responding to public comment. Most districts do not respond to public comment during that time. Typically, a member of the cabinet, if that item is assigned, if it's a human resources item, if it's an item for curriculum and instruction, those items are funneled through those individuals. However, the board can respond after the public comments via email, which will become shared. That concludes the presentation on feedback from the community on board policy BBBH, EKC. I welcome any questions that the board may have.
So to recap, the legislature made changes that forced us to make changes to our policy. We are providing additional clarity around how agenda items may be added. This is really, policy is really our standards by which we will conduct ourselves. So community members can always still reach out. This is just putting the framework out there that, you know, should someone feel like they're, you know, they suggested an agenda item to Ms. Withacombe, it wasn't put on the agenda, to be able to come back and say, I thought this was the process. You followed the process or you didn't follow the process, sort of thing. Okay, thank you.
So who does the community need to send a request to directly?
So we are finalizing the procedure. Ms. Norton already completed the form by which MRH will add to the district website, because there are two parts of that. So one of the forms would actually detail out, have you requested a meeting with the superintendent? So that will then prompt another form to come so the individual can put their item and their information in. So for example, the goal is not to create a barrier. The goal is to ensure that all of the information that the board would need to make an informed decision is included in the agenda item. So for example, if it's who have you talked to before, what's the agenda item, what's the resolution that's being sought after? And that would also give you an opportunity, similar to the previous process, if there are questions, to ask questions of that community member to gain clarity prior to them actually presenting.
And our board agendas are always posted the Friday before a meeting. So this allows enough time for items to be included on those agendas that are publicly available, and provide notice for any other community members who may want to learn about the agenda item. Great.
A quick comment that I appreciate the 72-hour recommendation for board replies, given that we all have day jobs. it sometimes takes a bit of time to collect all the information we need to make an appropriate response. So it's much appreciated.
And we'll be approving that this evening to be in compliance with
We're
statute?
bringing that item back on the 29th, so we need to make the adjustments, and so it wouldn't be a review, it would just be approval.
Okay, when we approve the budget, we will also approve this policy. Thank you.
Okay, no more questions. We'll move on to 3.06, which is a new proposed policy, JFBB, student advisor to the board.
So I'm really excited about this particular policy recommendation. When I started in the role for the 21-22 school year, and through my listening and learning, a lot of our students indicated that they wanted to have an active voice and also be a part of advocacy. This particular policy aligns with our cornerstones of developing students as leaders. It also is in response to some of the pitches heard in the public speaking class. And so I know that Ms. Kaufman, Ms. Withicum, myself sat and actually listened to the pitches of students of Better MRH in Mr. McCullum's room, and they had also made the ask. And then it also aligns with our aim of cultivating advocacy for student voice, and that was also demonstrated with our first student plan and led board forum. So I'm just going to highlight a few pieces. Just as a note, this again is an example of a policy that was initiated by feedback from students. If you notice that this particular item is a policy that the board created. So this is not a policy that MSBA recommended to us. And so we took the information from students as a means to try to craft this. I do want to thank Ms. Norton for giving me a draft to react to. So just to highlight and lift out a couple things. So the goal of this particular policy is to recognize the importance of students in the decision-making process, and also to allow an opportunity for representatives from different backgrounds to have a voice in the decision-making that's happening in the district. But it also aligns with our efforts of promoting equity and inclusion. A few things to think about for the role of the student board advisors. They are non-voting members. They do have the ability to actually advocate, share, provide feedback, and they also are paramount in influencing the thinking of the board members. And they also will have a responsibility of regularly communicating out to other schools who will have groups of students, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. The eligibility is the individuals have to be a full-time student, a rising junior or senior, and they have to be on track for graduation. So you did not hear me mention GPA, you did not hear me mention grades. I said on track for graduation because we do want to make sure that we are being equitable in our selection of students and to ensure that we get a diverse population of students. They also have to demonstrate community involvement and leadership qualities as outlined by our cornerstones. The Turner position is outlined here. They have one academic year, and we modified the window because, of course, students aren't in school during summer. So their term will begin in September. It will conclude in June. And so as soon as students return back, we will begin promoting that information so individuals can actually put in an application to become a member of the board. So what do we expect of them? There are expectations. One, they have to attend all meetings. Actively participate, which means reviewing their board agenda items and any attachments, and sometimes the board members do have homework. They also will have to report out information received from the board to their stakeholder groups, and so I talked a little bit about that, but each school will have a principal advisory committee. That committee will then be the committee that meets with the student reps at the high school. So that information can actually be brought back. So if there are concerns at any of our buildings, even the little Blue Devils at the ECC, those high school students will be the conduit for that. So I'm excited about that particular piece. I will like to note and highlight that legal counsel did make the recommendation to add to this particular policy that students are not participants in executive session, and that's because of discussions around personnel matters, legal matters, and real estate matters. So the selection process, I will say I'm probably most excited about. Typically when you see an election, students vote, and sometimes that becomes a popularity contest. So if you're popular, you get to be on the student rep for the board. So the goal is to take a committee approach that includes admin, faculty, and members of the student body. And so once that's up and running, we'll have the vice president and the president to be a part, and they will utilize Robert's Rule of Order and also have to facilitate and conduct their meetings just like the school board. The student reps outlined here will also go through an onboarding process, whether it's with me or members of my cabinet. And the last piece just talks about the district's stand on equity and inclusion. So that concludes the first read and review of our student board rep policy. I welcome any questions you may have.
Can you clarify for us the relationship between the Principals Advisory Council, how those are comprised, and then how they facilitate communication to these board reps, how that's carried out?
Still in process, so that will be a procedure that's being developed. We already started. So the high school will have 7 members. 2 of those members will actually be appointed by the administration to ensure that we have students who typically would not be placed on as a rep. So for example, a student who might receive educational services through our ed programs could be identified by a member of admin to be a member, and you may have a student who typically is not actively engaged given any opportunity. But the high school members would actually meet, and we have not discussed yet the cadence of that meeting, but that group of individuals will go and meet with students at the elementary school, so there will be an advisory committee at the 6th grade, and then also the ECC will have one as well. And so those student reps would then report out at board meetings, and it will be aligned to the strategic plan. And so if you stay to see parts of that, you'll see those priority areas, but it's for our students, for our health, et cetera. So when they're reporting out, if there's an item that is aligned to the strategies and goals, that information will feed into their presentation. And then any concerns or opportunities that are surfacing from other buildings will also come out during that presentation to the board. And so I will then meet with the vice president and the president and vice president of the high school group to go over their agenda items, and then with the assistance of my wonderful assistant, we will load that item up just like we do other agenda items. So I'm super excited about this. Last year I thought I would be able to get this off the ground, but I am an advocate for student voice. I believe in it, and I think this is another way to give them a platform to be able to not only provide insight to members of our board, but also share the amazing things that are happening within our schools.
So question, Benita, so they'll be attending our board meeting as well, is that correct?
Yes.
Will we have something in place for like during finals? And I just don't want to create a situation where they're here and having to now navigate homework and studying and missing out on that, though it's important for them to be here. Maybe have some exceptions.
Yeah, or potentially an alternate situation. I do know in other larger school districts like SLPS, there are multiple student board reps that take rotations.
This is really exciting. I know in my tenure on the board, we have discussed this idea and it's never quite gotten off the ground. I think it was last on the board agenda in 2017, where we said, yes, absolutely, we want a student rep on the board. So good to see this come to fruition. Question about requirement to be a full-time student. Would that exclude South Tech students?
So those students are our students enrolled. Okay. They just attend part-time, so they would have an opportunity to still.
Clarifying that that doesn't exclude them from participating. Thank you.
Let's move us on to 3.06, the strategic plan presentation with Dr. Jameson and Dr. McGee.
3.07.
While my co-pilot gets the presentation up and going, I first want to thank those individuals who participated as members of the steering committee. One of the things the district wanted to put a lot of attention into is ensuring that that committee not only was a representation of all of our district buildings, but also reflected the diversity that we wanted to see as we begin to think about decision making. while I work closely with Dr. McGee, I will say that he has ushered this work along with feedback and also members of my team. So they have responded to a great deal of feedback in order for us to get to this particular point. But it is actually the effort of those individuals who were on the steering committee, our students, our families, our business leaders, the partners at St. Louis universities, people from our civic areas, whether Richmond Heights and Maplewood, who contributed greatly and gave us feedback in regards to, is it what we're developing, honoring the history of the district because that's important, but then also building upon the successes that we've had to shape our future to ensure that we are graduating students, whether they go to post-secondary or decide to go straight into careers. So without further ado, I am going to pass it over to Dr. McGee.
All right, thank you so much. Good evening, board. Tonight I have for you the latest draft, the final edits, and of course with any final edits, we still are noticing there's a word missing. So we're going to give you everything and talk about a couple things that we'll tweak whenever we get out of here, but want to walk you through the document now that it's in its final form without its watermark and give you some quick highlights around each page and get us working and talking. That's too fast. All right, let's just go there. Okay. So obviously you all penned a wonderful letter, and that gets us going as an inspirational cast off to our journey and gets us moving into the document itself. Then Dr. Jameson gave us our sort of grounding in the work that we were working towards and recognizing that we are here to try and nurture and bring forth a new future. With that, I pause here on the overview of the process, mostly because I want to highlight kind of three key parts here. First of all, overview of the process, recognizing that we use an intense amount of data. There was a lot of Zoom meetings, and we involved hundreds of people in this process. So the couple things that I want to highlight is that the people listed in the center were the ones that were on the monthly steering committee meetings. Those people were all individually picked for that to make sure that we were honoring student voice, and not necessarily the the AP student, but also a student that is just a student that walks our halls or maybe experiences education in new and different ways. We wanted to make sure that we had community members, not necessarily ones that had students in our space, but also an opportunity for our parents to have a voice, our PTO organizations, as well as our support staff. So we were very intentional about the groups that we put together to be a part of our steering committee. We did not take that responsibility lightly. I'll direct your attention to the bottom of the screen and the timeline. I do want to focus on a couple key things and events that happened. Obviously, this hasn't been going on for a week. This has been going on for this entire year. And one of the things I want to highlight is both in March and April, we got to a point where things were forming, things were real, and it really made sense for us to engage in some focus groups. So specifically, we had 10 focus groups that gathered in March and 9 more that gathered in April. And each of those had 20 to 40 people involved. So that is an astronomical amount of feedback. To specifically give you ideas, that is middle school and upper elementary students. They were on a Zoom with a consultant giving feedback to our strategic plan. Our support staff. We had 4 separate groups of teachers, one for each building, and then an opportunity for some cross-grouping if they weren't available at the time that their building was there. Parents, community members and business owners, administrators, making sure that we had voice and made sure that we were listening to what was going on. So this is a piece of paper a document here that does not truly represent the amount of voice and the amount of time and effort and people that have their fingerprints on this document.
Chris, before you move on, can I ask, among the teachers that were represented on the strategic plan steering committee, how many of them are tenured?
I don't know that off the top of my head. I would have to research that.
I'm saying several teachers who've been here for a number of years.
Yes, yes. We have several teachers who have been here for a number of years, but we also have some staff members, it's their first year in MRH. So
Yeah.
it's a great
Pretty
mix.
broad diversity. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for stopping when there was a question and not waiting till the end. So I'm going to encourage the rest of our board to do that as well.
And the same is true for support staff members as well, our classified staff. I want to make sure I lift that up.
Thank you. All right. Well, MRH has been around since 1840, and this page was extremely difficult to create. It spilled onto many second and third pages, but we tried to think through and really have a discerning eye on what exactly made us who we are and what were some of those key experiences and key events. So that shaped this document and to give us a little bit of, to know where we came from. Now to some of the founding work moving forward. Our mission and our vision. We have seen the vision statement before. Leaders, scholars, stewards, and citizens is a key aspect to who we are as MRH and is still a part of what we are striving to be every day. But through that, how we act and how we show up is our mission. And we do that by supporting, educating, encouraging, and nurturing one another as well as our students. And the work that the team did to create the acronym SEEN allows us to ground in that and make sure that we see each of us individually. Our core values, which to my knowledge have not been established as a part of who MRH is in all the documents I could go back in time. I think this truly personifies what a Blue Devil is and what it means to be a part of MRH. We focus on belonging as our first aspect of our core values. The integrity of doing what's right even in the face of adversity. Inspiring ourselves and others. Being courageous, as evidenced by taking a risk now and then. And of course, doing everything we can to set goals and really strive for personal success. Not necessarily traditional success, that we don't always need that moniker, but what are the goals individually that we're working towards. We now have a portrait of a graduate, a wonderful document that can further our conversations over the next 5 years to say, what does this really mean? What does it really mean to be a critical thinker in 2028? What does it mean to be a successful communicator, collaborator? And you remember we had empathetic down on the bottom because we really do value empathy, but we also value alliteration. So we chose to add compassionate down there on the bottom, and I think that that's an equal or upgrade to that, so that's fantastic. Now I'll center here around the goals. So what ends up happening with our strategic plan is we have our mission and our vision, our core values, and our portrait of a graduate, and then all those set as our foundation to create some key performance indicators for us to strive to achieve. This becomes the work, if you will, of the organization. So we centered around 5. The first one being for our students. Obviously, our students are the #1 most important thing. So we make sure that that is the one that we have here. What I want to bring to your attention is that what we want for our students is high quality learning experiences. We do that well now, we can do even better. And that's what we're going to strive. And we can do that through ensuring that our kids are success ready, they have authentic learning experiences, and we make sure that everyone has that opportunity to succeed, and that's our equitable learning. With that, we're going to develop a kind of a scorecard or dashboard. How are we doing with each of these outcomes that we've set for us? So right here, we know we want to increase our performance in an area. Well, we want to know what is our current performance, and then what are we striving for year over year. Part of our presentation to you over the next 5 years will be holding us accountable to meeting these objectives. And we want to set our goals, set rigorous goals, and do what we can to achieve them within that. We didn't put the quantifiable measures in here because we know that some of those metrics are going to change, and we're going to need to continue to bring updates to you as new information is presented as a part of our school improvement process.
Chris, can I ask, how are you going to be structuring that dashboard? Is this data that can be fed into Tableau that will propagate to the website? How can we display that?
Well, I'm going to show you that soon.
Thank you.
But later on, you're going to click on on the link here in this document, because this document is a live, living document, and it's going to take you to our district website. And if you haven't paid attention to our district website lately, there's a brand new button. This weird one called COVID, I don't know if you've heard of it, has gone away, and a new dashboard has been created, and that new space is for our strategic plan. So we are truly letting go of the old and moving into the future. So we're really excited about that. So thanks to Mr. Rich for making that happen. So that dashboard will be a living thing on our website that creates the opportunity for our community as well as for us to share our story. Okay, second, yes, we work for our students, but we also make sure that our staff as well as our students are physically, emotionally, and the third one that's off the top of my head, social emotionally, there it is, healthy and well. So we set goals centered around wellness, and not just physical wellness, but that sense of belonging and truly being a member of the community. We have strategies associated with that. And on this page, I do want to highlight, you'll notice at the bottom of the page, it says in really small font on the screen, to view action steps before our health, click here. And what we'll have as a part of this PDF is this will be interactive. So this will take you to a updated sort of working space. And you can see it's draft now, but it allows people to see where are they right now with that activity. And of course I closed the tab I didn't want to close. And be able to see where we are and what we're working on in order to make that happen. So I wanted to kind of just bring out that not only is this a flat PDF that we all know, but it also has an interactive feature, and that's what we really want people to understand with this strategic plan. Is like, yes, it'll be a part of our website. Yes, it will be a printed document, but it'll also be interactive. And with those, again, we have outcome measures, and again, those will be a part of our scorecard or dashboard. As we always want to make sure we focus on our people, recruiting and retention, professional growth, celebrating and securing a diverse workforce, and ensuring that the place that they come to work every day is a place that helps them thrive through successful climate and culture. We are doing that work right now with our commitment to professional learning communities. The way that we work together is to strive to improve outcomes for students. So we want to continue that commitment and make sure that that is a part that is front and center on our dashboard. Outcomes associated with that will be linked there. Well, we can't hire people and we can't support students if we don't have the resources to make that happen. So this focuses on our resources, centers around not only our buildings, but also our financial well-being. I will note on this page that we do play a bit of what's called telephone with the person making this document. So I communicate with our consultant communicates with the graphic designer. So there are a number one and a bullet point, which are two versions of the exact same sentence. So we will going to clean that up and keep the bullet point, because that was the revised one that they were supposed to understand. So we'll clean that up in our follow-up here. But I wanted to make sure that you saw that there should not be a bullet point underneath that, and that's again part of the fun. And then of course outcome measures associated with that, and continuing our focus on our financial capacity and our operational excellence. And last but certainly not least is our focus on community. We know that the resources and our students all come from our relationship with our community. So our goals are to strengthen those relationships, provide clear and consistent communication, and then expand, strengthen, maintain meaningful community with a period, and it should say engagement at the end of goal number 3. But for some reason that word didn't make it into this document, so I will add the word engagement. But you'll also notice that 5.1, 5.2, and now 5.3 really highlights the word engagement and our commitment to engagement. Now, a strategic plan will be adopted, I hope, tonight, and then this document is never finished. It is a living and breathing document, and part of our commitment to that is publishing this this document and then recognizing that, as I've shown you tonight, it's interactive. And the why that we want it to be interactive, we want it to be living. We want to continue to provide updates and make sure that there is a space grounded for that. So if you click here on this, and I'm going to do it again. Here, I'm going to learn my lesson, open a new tab. If you click on the link and go to our website, right here in the center, there's a new button, and that new button is our strategic plan. And then here, you'll see every meeting, every resource, every feedback we've had throughout this entire process, and soon will be, after this evening, this document and all the good things and great things that come along with that. So we will continue that work, and that will work there on our website. And recognize we are focusing on talking about how we allocate our resources, how we can keep up with the action steps, and recognize that every plan that we do, from professional development all the way through technology and our student support plan, all comes back to this work. And we were really trying to make this a comprehensive document moving forward. Final page has our at a glance, where if you don't know something about our district, we have put together an amazing document with the support of Mr. Holzer, putting all of these sort of financials and demographics and facilities all on a page, and it gives a great little overview of who we are in a snapshot. And that ends our strategic plan document. Do you have any questions for me?
Well, I have a, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, Dr. McGee, can you talk about the alignment of the strategic plan to MSIP 6? I think that's an important piece that we want to highlight too.
Yes. So I will go back to the document sort of here in the action steps. So, for example, I'm going to pick on for our community here real quick. You'll notice there's that link to that connection. What we've been really intentional about is recognizing that when we have a goal in our strategic plan, when we look at our outcome measure and our strategy of how we're going to achieve that, we always connect it to our MSIP 6 standards. That is hard to say with someone who had a lisp as a child. So,
For our community's sake, can you tell us what MSIP is?
yes, MSIP 6 is the 6th iteration, man, I can't get through the S's tonight, of the Missouri School Improvement Plan or Program. And it sets a level of expectation and standards on how a school district should be managed or run, and it gives us guidance. So one of the things that DESE provides for us is a long list of standards that are based on state statutes that tell us that a school board should do these things, and the responsibility is as such. The leadership should have these sort of kinds of policies. All of these are things that are our guiding resources that tell us all the things that go well in a school district. So our main focus with that strategic plan is recognizing that every single one of these goals and strategies all tie back to a specific standard outlined in MSIP 6. Thank you. Sorry, that was a really long answer with a lot of S's.
Okay. Thanks. I think that's kind of part of my question, but what I'm curious about is, okay, this is all very good and, kind of a high level look at it, but how do we do it? I mean, what is actually being done to make sure that the curriculum not only, complies, but, I mean, is there any way to inform people like how this particular class corresponds with this particular value or something, so that people can actually see on a lower level or higher level, I guess, depending on how you're going through the branch, like what exactly is going on in the classroom that is helping to further this plan.
I'll start. You finish? Yeah. So the first piece is that there should be a cascading down as well as a funneling up. So there's got to be a two-way feeder pattern. Otherwise, it's just an artifact that sits on a website and means nothing. So from this informs all of our other plans. So even when I present later on our professional development plan, that is based on our it's on our old strategic plan because this isn't adopted yet. But my next one will be based on the goals and the strategies outlined here. So in addition to that, that's what also feeds back up to the scoreboard. So when we are talking about how students are performing in a classroom, those metrics are aligned to our outcomes. Those outcomes are aligned to our goals. Those goals help us achieve our mission and our vision.
So I think to add on to that, two things. An example of such, if you follow me on Twitter or any of my team members, we were at Professional Learning Communities PD today, which is outlined in the strategic plan. So when you ask how are these things operationalized, it's through clarity and commitment. So if you've ever heard your child say, I saw Dr. Jameson walking in classrooms. I'm in classrooms often. We inspect what we expect. And it's not necessarily looking at what the teacher is doing, it's looking at alignment to curriculum, whether or not instructional strategies, which are actually outlined in the strategic plan, are being implemented, and it's for coaching purposes. And so one of the things I walked away with from the professional development today is that part of the work with professional learning communities is rooted in culture, and it's about behavior and teaching people through the behaviors, and that is a coaching piece. So you would see evidence of that through the feedback to the board, feedback in regards to instructional walkthroughs, professional development evaluations, saying that the professional development stuck. You would also see evidence of that if we're talking about increasing the number of students in AP classes. You would see an ask come to the board to say, we would like to add this AP class, but the dashboard will be part of that. But a lot of the work that we do is rooted in the buildings, it's rooted in what you see on a day-to-day basis, and I think part of that is allowing our community to spend time in our spaces so that you too can see the work that's actually taking place. So thank you for that question, but I do think it's rooted in the day-to-day, sometimes the things, I say it's the stuff that happens behind the curtains that our community wouldn't see because they are not in the spaces on a day-to-day basis. But also survey data would be part of that, which is one of the items I'm excited about presenting on today too.
Right, and the only reason I bring this up is because there seems to be a disconnect between what's actually happening in the buildings and what's perceived to be happening in the buildings, and it's all about, I would just hope that there's a way to say that, you know, this is how we're holding ourselves accountable, these are the standards that we're setting, and this is how we're getting to those standards so that we can actually see what is happening.
And previously, that wasn't necessarily happening, is that correct? Like there wasn't necessarily these are our goals, this is our plan, and this is how we're holding an accountability for, is that what's happening in the classroom? Is that what we're seeing in the data? And I recognize that the data isn't always going to catch up, right? Because there are gaps, et cetera. You can't undo that overnight, but we're looking to see that the plan that we have in place is actually being implemented for all students in the classroom. Is that right?
That's correct. And I think, you know, part of it is change takes time, and I think somebody mentioned that during public comment, and I call it a swan dance. So for those individuals who talk to me, they will hear me say, it's a swan dance. You have to go slow in order to go fast. And I think, you know, part of that conversation around accountability. So I am in buildings frequently. I am in classrooms frequently. I do expect my principals to give feedback to their teachers. They get coached, they get feedback. But that's a piece that our community wouldn't see. And then the other piece is having a level of accountability around action steps. If the expectation is for you to be in classrooms coaching and giving feedback, that is the expectation. And that's how we change practice when we begin to talk about behaviors. If the expectation is to look at data, then that's the expectation in order to respond to that data or to identify supports for students who are not necessarily getting to where we want them to go. And so I know the work seems so simplistic, but it is much more complex. I welcome any community member who's interested in joining me on my instructional walks or joining Dr. McGee when he's observing professional learning communities being implemented. And it's not because we are adding extra work, it's because your kids in our community deserve it. And there is a gap there, so, you know, the data says that in Westford we're responding to.
There was also a gap in AP classes, like we were seeing differences in who was being selected, who was being left out, the numbers, that the strategic plan and it being implemented a certain way also helps change that as well, so that you don't have just the same people in all the AP classes, but all students are given that opportunity. Is that correct?
So that's part of the action step for Dr. McGee, as he works with those individuals, but yes, looking at ways to open doors and looking at the criteria for entry. And I will say that out the mouths of babes, the kids tell me so much when I'm sitting with them during lunch bunch. For example, you know, when they say I have to take 2 complex math classes at the secondary level because I couldn't gain entry into an algebra class in 8th grade because I didn't meet the criteria. That means that we are creating barriers. We don't want to produce opportunities for kids where they have to be proficient or advanced. They have to show grit and perseverance, and there is a difference. And so I think as we continue to have these conversations, that is how we implement diversity, equity, inclusion, and provide those opportunities. But the data says, to Josh's point, we also have to track that. So when we begin to bring those baseline pieces to the board, we can say we have this number of students of color or these number of students with disabilities in AP classes, because there shouldn't be that a student with a disability can't be. Or the conversation can be rooted in this number of students are participating in early college. And I will tell you that I look at every piece of data, and if you want to know the number of students of color in early college, it is not proportional. So, you know, those are the things that I'm trying to highlight when we talk about looking at data, and to make sure that we're putting the necessary supports in place, so all actually means all, and that we can continue to see all groups of students move forward. So I'm excited about the strategic plan. It gives the board a roadmap. It gives the board the measures to hold me accountable so that I can continue to hold my cabinet accountable for the work that's for kids. So I'm excited about this work, and again, thank you, Dr. McGee, for ushering it forward.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Jameson, thank you for saying that. If you all know me, I'm really big on community and family. So as you are talking about the community engagement, the family engagement part, it looked all good on paper and everything, and thank you for trying to really reach out to our Black and brown families, especially our students. But how, because as you can tell, they really don't feel a part of the school. Yes, my kids go here, but I don't feel part of the community. I don't feel part of the school. And sometimes paths are put in place to make it difficult for them to feel welcome. I am an alumni, so I've seen the changes that has gone on in this district. How can we, and even your cabinet, work together with the community to make everyone feel welcome? Everyone say it and speak it, but where's the action?
So I would say the work is actually starting with Vince Estrada's work around family and community engagement. So he's working currently to develop a committee, and that committee will then develop a vision for what we want community engagement to look like. And I think the misconception is that families of color don't want to be engaged. That's erroneous. We need to identify how they need to be engaged. And so that's the piece that I want to chip into, but engagement for all. So is that a book study? Is that a workshop? Is that helping parents to understand how they can better meet the needs of their kids? And I will tell you that for our families of color, that has been a challenging door that I have not yet been able to kick down. And I would even venture to say for our families who have students who identify as LGBTQIA, and our families who have children who receive support from special school districts. And that actually was quite evident during our Snacks with the Soup and some of the growth opportunities that are needed. So I think that there are so many groups who are not represented at the table that we have to, and I mean, me and my team continue to figure out ways to do that and to listen to what they need. So if there are any residents who are watching virtually or sitting in the audience, if you want me to sit on your porch to have a conversation, I'm open for that. Sitting in your home, I'm open for that. I am open for dialogue. And I think one of the things we have to be reminded that collaboration does not mean agreement. And so as we talk about how do we work towards increasing family engagement, we have to first understand how our families want to be engaged. But that's part of the work, and I'm looking forward to supporting Mr. Estrada with that.
Thank you so much.
think that family engagement piece too really undergirds what we haven't really talked about specifically. Brandy brought it up. The incredible disparities that we have in achievement outcomes for students of color. It was personally pretty shocking to me when I joined the board and really started to dig into that data. And I see this as an opportunity for us to live into the moral imperative that we have as a district to do the things that we say we're doing. And it's been evident as we've looked at the data over the past 2 years at least, that we're not doing that. And there is incredible urgency. It's really rewarding to have worked with Chris in this process when we sat in that room in September for 6 hours and really thought through what is it that needs to happen here? What is the vision for this district? I think all of us very readily identified what we thought needed to be done because we know the potential and we know the promise of this district. We've lived it for so long and we need to manifest it.
I want to say this as a board member who is a parent who has children with special needs, children of color, who believes in this district, will always believe in this district, and was a part of the dream, right? We come here and this is the education your kids get, which is amazing. But the disparities are very clear when you get into the data, when you begin to do the deep dive. And it becomes evident that unfortunately, the education and the community that you feel here might differ based on if you have special needs, if you are a person of color, etc. And so we still believe in the values of MRH, period. Those are our core values. I just want to see everyone get to experience those core values and it not be based on who is shinier, who is, who fits a mold, etc. It needs to be everyone. We've been saying we believe in it. We're asking now for the district to be accountable for that belief and to show that, one way is data, but that's not the only way, but to show that and for students that come here to be successful, all students regardless, because that is when you are truly the destination district, when anyone that comes here has an opportunity to have that awesome education, not just certain students. Thank you for your work.
All right, I'll wrap up with this because no one's going to carry 21 pages around in their pocket. I did work with the graphic designer to try and create a plan on a page, something small that we could carry around with us, something that can at least be readily available. So we have a couple drafts here that we're still kind of working on the layout that won't kill a printer whenever we try to print it out. But we do want to make sure that yes, the 21-page document is essential, but also it needs to be closer and it needs to be readily available. So we're working to create something that is a little more portable. So that's what you see kind of linked as a draft there in the document. So that way there's something small that we can carry with us. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Move on to admin communications, item 4.01, which is our climate and culture survey data from DESI.
All right, so as Dr. McGee stated, MSIP 6 outlines that we have to not only survey our community, parents, families around the climate and culture of our district, but we also have to report that information out. So I want to say publicly that every time we get data, that information is shared out. It is interesting that the surveys continue to say we don't. And so this information is put into the board agenda item for your consumption. So just a few pieces that I want to highlight about this particular survey. It is not a survey that was developed by the district. This particular survey is developed by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. They don't even distribute it. They partner with the University of Missouri Columbia. They distribute it. They send us the links. They're the holder of the data, and they send that 99-page document that is not palatable for anyone to review. And I will also say they did take the timeline. So as you can imagine, the first survey was actually supposed to be disseminated in September. I think we got it in October, and then the lead time to get that data back. And then this actual survey was completed, and we didn't get the data back until the end of May. And the distribution of this, actually they changed how the information was provided. So if you look at the attachments on the board agenda, you will find that there's a statewide pilot results. The previous data that was reported did not include that. It also has the change to indicate the varying items that DESE is reviewing. So while we like consistency, sometimes my good friends at DESE do not. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Dr. Davison, can I interrupt here?
Yes.
So we are required to do a culture and climate survey. We are not necessarily required to do this climate and culture survey going forward. Great, thank you.
Yes. So just want to highlight, come back to the definitions and ground us in climate and culture. They are not the same thing. People like to use it interchangeably. They are not. Climate is actually how we feel, and culture is the behavior of adults and students and the patterns that exist, and that was demonstrated during our professional learning communities, professional development this week. I also want to highlight the 5 core components of school culture and climate, and then make the attachment to our strategic plan. So one of them is around safety, not only physical safety, but psychological safety. This is highlighted in our strategic plan under multi-tiered systems of support. So as Dr. Miller talked about, ensuring that students who are supported through special school district, those are those interventions. That also includes any SEL curriculum that the district uses, which was adopted and approved by the board for second steps. Relationships, it's rooted in that. And then also teaching and learning, and then the environment, which is one that people typically don't see the relationship with, but the environment contributes to student engagement, sense of belonging, and then also the layout of the spaces actually contribute to teaching and learning. And then the last one is school improvement. And so for this one, it aligns directly to our strategic plan, which was previously presented. And feel free to stop if you have questions as I go. So one of the questions that I got was, can we talk about standard deviation? So as a precursor, I am not a statistician. So I will do my very best to give a high level and then make the connection to the survey data. So for me, what I took away from standard deviation is that it's the measure between the variance and different data points. So if you think about one, the higher the standard deviation indicates the greater variability, so like 0.8 of a point. And then the lower standard deviation indicates less variability, so 0.2. And so let's look at that in some real data. So if any of your children have ever taken a test in a classroom, there's a spread. So one of your children may come home and say, I got a 68, another one a 72, and so forth. So we're going to pretend that this is assessment data. So from the assessment data, in order for you to get to the standard deviation, you have to calculate the mean. I know it's been a long time since I've been in school, but basically you take the data set, you divide by the numbers that you have, you get an average. So in this particular case, 355 divided by 5 is 71. The next step in this process is to calculate the difference. So you take the mean of that data set, for example, 68, and you subtract 68 from 71, which gives you a number, for example, -3,149, and then you square the difference. So 9, 1, 16, 81, 121. And after you square the difference, you have to calculate the variance. And this is where it kind of gets tricky. So you add up those squared differences. You divide it by 5 minus 1, because again, you're looking at the mean, the outliers of 1. And then you do the math, because it's 228 divided by 4, which gives you 57. And then you square root the 57. So then that standard deviation is 7.55. So what that looks like is that if it's 68 on both ends, a plus or minus, it's 68 plus 7.55 or 68 minus 7.55, and that tells you which way the data can go. Again, the larger the number, it shows a variability. The smaller,
more in alignment.
And like Katie said, we don't have to use this one next year.
We don't. I particularly find it painstakingly long, and the data is not easily to read, and it doesn't highlight for you the opportunities, nor does it come with a guide in how to interpret. So there is a lot of data.
So, and we've been here, you know, for a bit. Can we move maybe ahead to what the highlights are for our consumption? I think it is, I appreciate the transparency of including the 99 pages, and folks who want to get a magnifying glass and zoom in can do so and, you know, pick things apart.
Yes.
Is it all right to move to what's actually actionable in here?
So what was very clear, and I'll start with students, bullying, teasing at the high school level. What came out was students not having a sense of belonging. It would be interesting to see the focus groups for that, because I'm interested in how that actually pans out, because when I looked at the student participation rate, it's a very small population of students, so that was something that came out. The big pieces that came out for staff were resources. I want to unpack that. I know a lot of the conversation that Dr. McGee and I have been having around curriculum and having programs, and so I want to differentiate curriculum and program. The program would be a book that would support the curriculum and the standards that are outlined. Teachers are asking for that, particularly in math, so I'm very curious as to what additional resources teachers are seeking. So that's something I'm going to dig into as I continue my post checks and my end of year rounding, and as we engage next year in our teacher leader groups. So that's part of the work. The parent piece is the piece that I found to be very interesting, so I just want to flip back to the family surveys. And so when I looked at the family surveys, a lot of the conversation that we get in communication that I received is that the culture in the schools is not conducive, but what parents are telling us, and I will say that, interestingly enough, the majority of the participants who took the survey are non-individuals of color. So our community is saying, when you look at a positive climate, that from a scale score, if you look at the bottom, 3 would be an agree, that at all of our buildings, parents feel that there is a positive school climate. Now, the opportunities, as we already know and I'm aware of, is that we need to do a better job of improving communication. We're working on it. Thank you, Mr. Rich, for sending out the survey. And we have responded to some of that. So when surveys are given, you find in the newsletter that information is being pushed back out to the community. I would encourage our community to look into the newsletter and see that information, because it is included. And that includes any policies that are actually coming through as well. And you will find here that for student respect, values, and recognition, we still have some work to do in that area. So again, if we were looking at the standard deviation of 8/10, that tells me that there's a lot of variability there, so we could add 8/10 to 2.93, and it could either be agree or disagree. So again, the survey is not the best survey from my vantage point, but this is the one that Desi asked us to use. So what's next? We want to continue with the site-based post checks for 23-24. So as some of the individuals during public comment shared, I actually do post checks with the teachers. Next year I'll make some adjustments so that they can do that void of their administrators, so that they feel like they have a voice. I will say that the one I facilitated at the elementary school, teachers were very forthcoming about opportunities, but also came with solutions and are rooted, invested in actually seeing the school continue to grow. The other piece that we will continue is surveying and disseminating results and collaborating on solutions. So I am imploring and encouraging our community to please be a part of the solution, and there are opportunities for that to occur. We may not always agree, but I am willing to listen. And then I think we talked about using the current district structures for problem solving, allocating resources around the bullying and teasing, and some of those items will be done with some of the purchases at each of the building, and then providing to stakeholders regarding decision making. The start part is what I'm most interested in. So aligning all district plans to the strategic plan, and I want to talk a little bit about that, because now that we have our priority areas identified, we can then pull community in for what I would call management oversight teams. So for example, when we talk about for our resources, I know that we have a lot of community members that are architects. They work in various areas of our community who can contribute to that conversation as we talk about improving outcomes in the area of facilities and our fiscal responsibility.
Identifying additional engagement opportunities for the Board of Education. That is an item I will be presenting as well. Continuing to collaborate with stakeholders around climate and culture for solutions, and then implementing a monitoring system to address, create safe and inclusive spaces for students and staff. And so looking at the current structure so that we're not adding additional pieces. I currently meet with MSTA and MEA. So one of the things I'm going to share with them is that not only that we continue with the current structure of the teacher leader meetings, but add a monthly touch point so that they can share things that are surfacing that we discussed prior to getting to teacher leader.
And just to clarify, those are our union representation.
That is correct.
In the buildings.
That is correct. Any questions you may have?
So the what's next here is still pretty high level, but it sounds like we can expect to see more strategic actions coming online in the details related to the strategic plan. We should be able to tie these things back. I would appreciate going forward. It sounds like we're probably not interested in continuing with this instrument as a tool for actual use. Thanks, Desi. I would really be interested to hear both from administration and from teachers what of the questions included we think are most important. I mean, you can't prioritize 99 things. So what are the areas that we should be asking about so that we can track some progress? I think it would be helpful to know from potentially the union reps or union members and administration.
I'd like us to dig a little bit deeper around the collaboration to address climate and culture and what kind of infrastructure we're going to put in place to engage all stakeholders in that process. I know we're just sort of starting to think about this, and we have a lot of feedback that we're going to be reviewing in executive session from building surveys, from exit interviews. But I think in order to make this work visible to our community, I think it would be important to engage them in something like a climate and culture task force. I'm just spitballing here. That's something that's been going on within my own employer's institution to help stem some of the culture and climate changes as a result of high employee turnover. But I think having some kind of framework for us to be able to document and also include our community would be good.
And I think finding a different survey, because I think the survey is important. It's just the particular one doesn't really help as much.
No other questions or comments? All right, let's go ahead and move on to our construction update.
Okay, so there is a lot of exciting work happening outside that we've been waiting for a while. They've been inside that skeleton of a building there for a couple months now, and now we're starting to see things happen on the outside. So over the last couple days, you've seen some of the steel structure go up that will hold the brick and the aluminum and glass storefront. The roof deck is complete, ready for blocking, which means after blocking we get styrofoam to insulate the roof. Very cool stuff. The awning went up today. That surprised me. When I drove by first thing this morning, it wasn't there. And then when I came back at lunchtime, it was there. And I thought I was losing my mind for a second, but the iron workers knocked that out this morning. So that's really cool. That will be the walkway in front of the new building A over here. Mechanical is almost done down in the basement. All the framing is done down in the basement. Door frames are set. So we are getting ready, once we close that building up, to really start cruising on getting this thing done. So we're still looking at mid-October to open the building. But we, I'd love to say that we're going to finish it sooner than that, but I'm not going to say that. But once we get it under roof and closed up, things can really start to happen, because then we're no longer affected by the weather. We have been blessed with wonderful weather over this past month, 6 weeks or so. It's not great for the plants, but it's great for construction. Unfortunately, there is a mason shortage. So instead of having a glut of masons out there, we only have one crew, and they're bouncing back and forth between the gym lobby and the gym. So if you happen to know, anyone in the room happens to know any masons, please send them to me, and we will direct them to the Mason Hall down the road and get them signed up with Tenias, who is our mason subcontractor, and we'll put them to work. So no need for anyone with those skills to be sitting idle. Things are moving along. Graduation, I think the front of the building looked beautiful, especially compared to what it looked like just a month ago. So I was really pleased to see that landscaping come in, all those baby shrubs and trees that will, in 5 or 10 years, look amazing. But we're thankful that things are moving along as well as they are. The budget is tight. You'll see that in my report there. We're getting close. We're counting down. Luckily, interest rates have been favorable, so we've got the money invested in the liquid series that's earning over 4% interest. So, of course, that declines every time we do a draw, but it has been quite helpful and on the revenue side of things. So, any questions?
I know we've talked about this in the past. We do have a plan for how we'll deal with school starting and construction. Still not concluded.
Yes, developing. Developing. Yeah, and it is worth mentioning. So the good thing is that we're able to function in the spaces that we have currently. This is adding to so that we can expand into. One thing that we're looking at perhaps accelerating one aspect of the project. I talked with Vince about this yesterday. It's one thing about working at MRH, there's always wonderful problems to solve. So we'll keep you posted on that. If we might rephase a couple things to make things look a little different at the start of the school year, but we'll see.
Thank you.
All right. Ed, have you got a video for us?
Hi, this month's video doesn't require a lot of narration by me. The pictures speak for themselves. A couple of key characteristics, though, that I've noticed at least. The sun made that look. Most of the work that I've noticed the past 2-3 weeks is happening in baskets on the end of the frames, because that's the point where we are right now. Also, I'm not so sure that these guys wearing hard hats and long sleeves and pants and heavy boots and 92 degrees would agree with my contention that the weather's been good, but it has. It hasn't been wet. The rain is our enemy. So we're doing well there. Also, the fact that all of the students are gone and most of the staff are gone has allowed us to utilize the parking lot over here as kind of a staging area, the steel and the girders and everything that's in the cinder blocks for that matter. This is what I'm talking about, is they need all the space that they can get. You can see, they've got dumpsters, they've got containers, they've got, mixing, cement and concrete there, using the lot for all the supplies that they need. This next video sequence I took because at the end, as we're moving west, I noticed that the iconic door that used to be, I guess, the back entrance to the gymnasium is going away, which made me kind of sad, but it's not really that sad, so there it is. It's going away. So that's the, that's the masonry work that Chris was referring to. Everything's up, everything's in the air these days, and the progress is just remarkable. So there you go. Thanks.
Thanks, Ed.
4.04, program evaluation for professional development.
All right, good evening, board. I'm happy to be back and provide you a little update on professional development. So this program evaluation is set to sort of sunset the 2022-2023 year and then give us some goals for next year when we think of the professional learning for our staff, as well as our support staff and our certificated staff. I will say that prior to taking this position, I've worked on the goals in partnership with my predecessor, so you're going to see those goals that I thought I was going to do, and then what reality actually happened once you get in and start doing the work. So when we think about our program overview for professional development, what we really are striving for is intentional, ongoing, and systemic professional development. We really want to make sure that we're not doing sort of the buffet style of professional learning. We're really focusing on something intentionally, and we do it around current research and best practices. We notice here that this is not our current strategic plan that I'm looking to propose to you tonight, because this, because you have not approved it yet, is based on our previous strategic plan. So these were notes that were in board docs, and noted here that this is what I used to frame up the work that we did this year, to give some knowledge to what came before my arrival in July. So some update on our current goals. I set 4 very lofty goals for myself in year 1 in related to professional development. I got 3 out of 4, so I think that would put me in a Hall of Fame for baseball. It would probably not get me another job if I was a doctor. So we need to make sure that we set some manageable goals and try to achieve them. So in partnership in drafting these goals for this year, we really wanted to first focus on instructional technology. I feel like we've met that with a number of support, both in person and virtual. We provide opportunities for job-embedded PD as part of building level PD plans, and we've done that with bringing in a professional development consultant, Nathan from Solution Tree, to help us get professional learning communities off the ground. I feel like I've not done a good job from the area of leading our curriculum action teams, because once I took over the job, I was handed the task of, oh, hey, by the way, all of your curriculum materials and resources are in this system that will no longer be around in North America by the end of June. So my life drastically shifted to preserving those documents and those resources and moving it over into a new system. So my constructive criticism of myself was not met, should not have met that as a goal, but I was striving towards that. And then embed technology tools and building level meetings. We've been doing that work throughout the year. So some of the data we wanted to share with you. So I believe in surveying, probably to the point of ad nauseum, but I literally ask myself and my team to read every single comment that comes in after a professional development event. So one of the things is, if a group of people are going to get together multiple times, I always give them a plus delta. It's a really simple, at the end of this event, I'm going to see that same group of people again. What went well? What can we improve? And then, of course, an open comment. So we had 628 responses throughout the year, or instances on that line, and then it's divided up into 624 positives, 557 opportunities for improvement. Those could be as small as the room is too cold, all the way up to, we really need to focus on this new thing. In addition to that, after every professional development day, we take stock of what we did, and one of the most important measurements here is, did you learn something? Did your knowledge of this content or skill when you entered change from when you left? So here you see a prior and an after, and I'm just going to focus your eyes on the red and notice that it's bigger on the left and on the right, and then focus on the green. Notice that it's bigger from the left to the right. Those are strong working knowledge and advanced knowledge, meaning that when we're working with teachers and when we're working with support staff, we are working to increase those skills. We're going to add another layer of that next year as we continue our instructional walks and really investigate. So you say you learned it. Did you do it in the room when you're working with the kids or with your colleagues or anything along those lines? So again, highlighting 694 responses throughout the year. That gives us a whopping total of, throughout the year, we ask a lot of feedback. We value that feedback. It is essential to our lifeblood of making sure that the work that we do on those days when kids are not in front of us and we're working with staff, that we are making this an environment where people believe that they're getting better with the skills and activities. So some of the data and results in our interest inventory was what were some of the things we want to work on in the future. So we've got that disaggregated by building and kind of defining what those things are and what they want to work on. Some of those high yield instructional strategies that teachers want to investigate are the concepts around self-reported grades. So when students know what it is they're trying to achieve and can communicate what it is they're trying to achieve, then they know how to achieve it. You know, it's kind of like having a rubric or a scoring guide. When you know what the final product look like, they can use metacognition to think about their performance to be able to achieve it. And then the second one is teacher estimates of achievement. That is, how do the teachers, their stance, if you will, their belief in whether or not a child can achieve that objective. And those are both have a little over 10,000 different instances of research in the Visible Learning book by Hattie that teachers are interested in learning more about. So we're going to weave those two concepts into next year's learning. You know, also in next year's learning, setting a goal is around how are we doing with professional learning communities. You know, I set up a pretty rudimentary rubric on like how you feel like it's going. So disaggregated that by building. I did also some math around me. I did not do standard deviation. I do apologize. I should have added that. But mean, median, and mode. The idea is we are having people connecting with one another around student performance. Our next step is to then discuss how are we doing that better? How can we add teaching practices, instructional strategies, and essentially the big four questions that the professional learning communities and solution tree asks us to strive for, which is, what do we expect students to know? How do we know if they've learned it? How do we respond when they don't? And how might we enrich them if they already know it? And if we can gather around those and solidify that, we're going to move from that average up into a higher functioning opportunity for teachers to work together. So yep.
Could you go back to that?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you talk to the striking difference in the elementary?
I can
Go ahead.
actually answer that one. So when I did my end of year rounding with the elementary schools, so they meet in professional learning communities, but part of the work that we need to do from the district level is help to operationalize what they are supposed to be doing during that time. So we need to teach them what to do. So for example, if you have data, and after you have that data from the benchmark, what can you do during that time? So you can actually create common formative assessments. Is that occurring? You can actually review assessments collaboratively. You can actually plan and review units. So for me, and especially stepping out of the professional development we just had the last few days, we need to go back and provide clarity to teach administrators how to facilitate that time. And so I had an aha moment, I think, when our consultant, Nathan Ware, was here. I observed a buildings PLC, and it was very clear to me that my leader didn't know how to intervene when the team got stuck. And so they were talking about writing and our current program that supports writing, not necessarily filling the gaps. And so that's when the light bulb came on. So the benefit, to your point, Josh, when you say, how do you know it's happening? Because I'm observing and I'm seeing it and I'm coaching, and those are the pieces that the community wouldn't see, because that's feedback that the principal gets, and the principal is expected to go back and coach their people to make those improvements. But yes, they're having them, but not doing the things that probably would move the needle. And so that's a revisit point for next year, and that's the feedback that I gave to the elementary school when we met.
The question too is a lot of the PD that the elementary is experiencing from prior, like it's not, we haven't made those changes yet because we're doing this to figure out what changes need to be made.
I would say yes and so, you know, the feedback that I got, and I am very transparent, is that as a result of some of the things that surfaced, some of the staff meetings got canceled. And so, you know, the piece for me is when I get that feedback, that's data for me to say we need to do something different. And so in my coaching session, my end of year coaching session, I provided a template for the building leadership to say, here's how you plan in alignment with the district strategic plan, your professional development to align to the needs of your staff. And so I think they have professional development, but also as a new leader, sometimes you don't know what your staff needs. And being able to go in and quickly assess that and implement. So making some adjustments to ensure that we're planning now, and that's already taken place. So at the onset of the year, staff will clearly know. And Dr. McGee actually created a PD site so that everybody will be able to see what professional development each building will be doing aligned to their building plans, which is aligned to the strategic plan. And the other piece is with staff members at the central office level will be supporting that professional development. So if a building is interested in restorative practices to build capacity in staff, you have Travis and Whitney who's able to do that. You have Melissa Foose who's able to do that. So we're using current staff to be able to support other buildings in the work. So I'm excited about that for next year.
So in this process, now that everything's kind of changing to conform with, assuming we adopted the new strategic plan, do you expect that the principals or the administrations will then have building plans, like before the start of the school year, so that you can review them, so we know exactly what we're looking at?
So DESE requires us to actually, at the end of the month, we have to provide them our plan and then also what they call a pre-planning guide. They will look at it, score it, and then will meet with me to give feedback and if they want adjustments. But we actually, the benefit, thank you board for letting me participate in the professional, the scoring committee for DESE. I already have the rubric in regards to what needs to be in the plan. So all members of cabinet went through, we scored it, and we made adjustments. The tweaks that you see are as a result of the things we saw were missing. But each building will have a plan aligned. Site that's been created actually will allow an opportunity for anybody to go in and see what those plans are with accountability measures as well. So to answer your question, they will start some of that work with their building leadership team this summer. Because the building leadership team is only a cross-section of the building, it will go into the beginning of the year. The state really gives us until like August for buildings to actually solidify plans and goals.
And is there anything in the DESE requirements that would be contrary to our strategic plan?
There is nothing. Everything is directly aligned, and I think the question around accountability, that's where it's coming from. Of course, we want to do what's best for kids, but DESE is very clear. So they changed, and we've done a couple of presentations. I think Ed sent something out in regards to how points are actually awarded. And so it's very different than what it was before, because now they have actually equally placed value on students who do very well and then students who don't do well. So you no longer get points, because if you're not moving the students who don't typically do well, students with IEPs, students who are free and reduced lunch, et cetera, then you don't, it's the same weighted amount. And so we have to pay attention to that as we move forward, but everything is closely aligned. Whether we're talking about attendance, we get points for that as well, and you'll see that as we report out in our dashboard.
So to be clear, we've been doing this work before DESE came out with some new regulations, but for those districts that their numbers are consistently low and they have not been able to move that needle, they're possibly going to be looking at accreditation issues in the very near future, because DESE is no longer allowing that to occur.
Right, and that's where you see the largest amount of spread. And so districts, I'm not going to name a district, but you'll have a district that historically had received 100 of the points, but then with the new system, they no longer are there. So you're seeing districts who were historically accredited, neighboring districts who if the accreditation status was changed this year, but with the new plan, if you can, they would be provisionally accredited. So you see the shifts. I think it might be prudent to share that information with community, so I'll find a way to kind of deconstruct that down so that community could see that. But the information that we shared, if we do not move forward with the recommendations in the plan, actually impacts accreditation, which could impact property values, which could impact individuals leaving out, because the data doesn't necessarily allow us to get awarded the points. So the work has been happening. There have been dramatic changes in regards to what we're tracking, for example, ICAP. So for those who have high school children, if you do not know what an ICAP is, that is something that's actually been added into MSIP 6 that's being tracked. It's been there, but 100% of the kids actually have to have an ICAP prior to graduating and starting in 8th grade. So, and Mr. Estrada is actually leading that work along with our counselors and so forth and building leaders.
All right, some analysis and conclusions. We're going to continue to focus on authentic learning for students, defining what that is with our staff. It had sort of the real world piece of it. I see it as strengthening our metaphors and really doing some work around what does that mean in 2023. And you'll also see that same phrase in our strategic plan as being a direct through line. Strengthening our understanding and active participation of PLCs, and then continuing to assess, listen, react, and demonstrate that we're listening and responding. So we're going to continue our commitment to our not only our formative data of plus delta, but also our end of event evaluations to prove we're on the right track. So instead of 4, I've cut down to 2 goals this year for professional development, and really there are 1. First, what I'd like to do is craft a 3 to 5 year plan. That doesn't mean just me. That means I work with a committee that is a requirement as a board policy called the Professional Development Committee. That is composed of 2 representatives from each of our schools from around the building, and we meet almost monthly to draft this concept. So that committee is going to be the work group that will help us craft a 3 to 5 year PD plan. And then secondly to that, we really want to really dedicate some learning to professional learning communities, continuing that work, because we know that the way we get better is we get better together, and we're committed to student growth as a team, not just as a group of teachers. So I'd really like to strive for our goal to increase from a 3 to a 4 in the mean, median, mode area. So we're going to give that same question at the end of next year with the hopes that we've designed learning to improve that outcome. My team and I created this cool little graphic because we thought it told a little story of, well, what are the areas of emphasis through the year? How might it impact and who might it impact? So recognizing that the most people will be involved in work centered around diversity, equity, inclusion, multi-tiered systems of support, and professional learning communities, and then a smaller group focus on that PLC question 1 and using understanding by design to truly understand in every course in our district, what do we want students to know, understand, and be able to do? What do we expect?
Dr. McGee,
Mm-hmm.
is UBD work new work for the district?
No, UBD I honestly cannot find a document that hasn't referenced UBD Stage 1 from the archives of as far as board docs goes back and as far as documentation in my office goes back. So we have been committed to understanding by design as a framework for curriculum. What's really interesting is if UBD has 3 stages really at its core, and if you were to set those 3 stages here and then set the PLC 4 questions, you'll be like, oh, hey, those are truly the exact same thing. Somebody just figured out a different way to monetize it and sell the other thing. So what's great is the fact that our teachers are already well versed in understanding what we want students to know and be able to do because they've done work around understanding by design. And of course, we saw some of the concepts around high yield instructional strategies. And then of course, we are in our first year of implementing Canvas across the district. So that is still going to be a heavy lift, both for our teachers and for our parents and our community to recognize that there's a new way to interact with what's going on in the classroom. So while that's a small sliver at the bottom of the graphic, it still weighs heavy.
Yeah, I think we can lift that up again. We are changing learning management systems from It's Learning to Canvas, and that will launch in the fall.
Yes,
That's been going on.
And not by choice, yes.
So that
Yeah.
will have an impact on how students, teachers, and families access, manage, submit content.
Correct. Questions that you
Thank you for your work on this.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
4.05, student discipline data review. Ben Gleason.
How did you get out of that drive? You stepped up.
Good evening, President Fiscal, Board, Dr. Jameson. My name is Ben Gleason. I am the Special Education Coordinator for the district. And the purpose of my presentation this evening is to bring to you information about suspension in school and out of school suspension in MRH, specifically as it relates to students with disabilities. As we start off here, there are a few points that point in a positive direction, while also we will see there are some very serious and significant points that will warrant further investigation and action. First of all, can you go back? Sorry.
My fault.
I do want to point out that overall, MRH does not use suspension at a high rate. We don't suspend lots and lots of kids because I think overall there's a belief in our district that students belong in school where they can be learning. The majority of suspensions that we're talking about tonight have occurred at the secondary level. The elementary has suspended very few students with IEPs the last few years. ECC has suspended none. This slide here, you will see it says behavioral incidents. So these are the number, well, these are percentages, but it's based on the number of incidents of suspension. And it's including out-of-school suspension and in-school suspension. So when we talk about incidents of suspension, there could be, in these figures, a student who may have been suspended multiple times that would create an increased number of incidents. Across the bottom here are the school years, 1920, 2021, 21-22, and then this most recent year that just wrapped up. I would encourage you to put very little emphasis on 2021. We were primarily virtual. There were very few suspensions. The data isn't super meaningful. To summarize and highlight here, the blue line is out-of-school suspensions for students with IEPs. The orange line is in-school suspensions for students with IEPs. You can see back a few years ago, it was about 50-50 in terms of the percentage of students with IEPs as compared to students without IEPs. That is out of proportion. Our district currently, in fact, then it was a little bit less. Currently, we have about 16% of our student population has an IEP. So if we were completely proportionate, we would have perhaps 16% of incidents for students with IEPs, and the other 84% would be students without. So that's clearly problematic. You can see, though, last year, and this just finished up here, the percentages for students with IEPs, again, the blue and the orange, are starting to come down. But here in this current, we just finished up year, we're still looking at about 30% of the incidents being students with IEPs. Again, 16% or so of our population has IEPs. So we are suspending students with IEPs disproportionately as compared to students without IEPs. This particular chart displays what's called the suspension incident rate. And just so you know how that is arrived at, basically we take the number of suspensions, and in this case we've combined in school and out of school together. We take that number of suspensions divided by the number of students with IEPs and then multiplied by 100. Here we've got high school, middle school, elementary, and ECC. So you can see, as I mentioned earlier, few if any suspensions at the younger grade levels, more suspensions at the middle and high school. The bottom line here, we want lower numbers, not higher numbers. Okay. Chris, if we could move to the next slide. Dr. McGee.
I thought I did it.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There you go.
Okay. This slide dives a little bit deeper, and it looks at the rate of students who are black with IEPs as compared to students with IEPs of other races. Okay. So the example at the top is if we had 10 students who identify as black and they were suspended compared to 5 students of other race groups, your ratio would be 2. Okay? So you can see again at the elementary and ECC, actually in the last 3 years, no students who are black have been suspended. That's why these are 0. At the middle school, focusing on the last 2 years, 3.2 and 0.67. So 1 year to the next isn't really a trend line, but it is positive that this year we were lower, high school also lower. One way to think about this, and this is the concerning part. Let's say at the high school, last year, black students with IEPs were 2.7 times more likely to be suspended than students of other races with IEPs. This just finished up year, black students with IEPs were 1.9 times more likely to be suspended than students of other races with IEPs. So,
Dr. Gleason, can you go to the next slide with the actual numbers?
Yes, ma'am.
Is this the numbers that are reflected in these percentages?
These are the raw numbers that were used to create the previous slide.
So am I reading that correctly, that in 21-22, more than double, almost triple, for black students with IEPs to be suspended, and that in 22-23, it's about double?
At the high school level, yes.
At the high school level,
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yep,
Okay.
you are correct.
That's what I wanted to know. Thank
Yep.
you.
So this is, just a few minutes ago when I was mentioning serious and significant issues that require attention and work, this is it. Okay? Yes, we want to get this overall suspension rate down for all students with IEPs, but this is particularly concerning.
And what percentage of the population, of our school population, are our black students with IEPs? If you know.
It mirrors the overall student population of black students in MRH, approximately a quarter, I believe. Somebody, Vince or someone.
Does this, I'm sorry, does this data take into account like what the actual offense was? Because
it does not.
Okay, because if you're not really comparing apples to apples, I mean, it could very well be that, some students are committing something that's more severe, like if everybody's got an IEP and it happens that, some students are committing offenses that are more serious, then they would naturally get suspended. I mean, I'm not trying to justify the numbers, I'm just trying to figure out exactly where they're coming from.
Sure.
Or Dr. Gleason, does it also take into account, like if the action or the behavior was related to their disability, or if it was off? It does.
So certainly administrators have discretion within the boundaries of policy to determine lengths of suspension, types of suspension, whether in school, out of school. So that could be a factor. Specific protections for students with IEPs have to be considered when they have been suspended cumulatively more than 10 days in a school year, or one consecutive incident of more than 10 days. And that actually brings up a point that I wanted to make, which is for the last 3+ years, we have not had any what are considered long-term suspensions one incident suspension over 10 days. Most of our suspensions are much shorter. To Mr. Miller's point, this does not take into account the type of offense, the severity of offense, and the reason being is any suspension, whether it's in school or out of school, is removing kids from their classroom curriculum and instruction. But you're right. There are students in this, suspension incidents that are because of students repeatedly skipping class, to students who got into some physical aggression. Very significant difference in those types of offenses. But the fact remains, when they're pulled out from their classroom instruction, they're missing out on opportunities to learn.
Do you have that data? So my guess is that we can't do a chart that says the types of offenses, because then that might be something identifiable for the student.
Yeah.
But we could do maybe a tiered 1, 2, 3, right? Level 1, level 2, level 3. Do you have the data to be able to do that, where we can compare the apples to oranges, where level 1 offenses, this is the differential in suspensions, level 2, level 3?
Yeah, I mean, we'd have to we'd have to define what
What's
a level 1,
level 2,
level 2, level 3 is. But yes, we have all that data. Actually, a lot of this data supplied by Rachel Ward, as a great partner that she is. But yes, we have the ability to look at the types of offenses and potentially to do that additional examination of.
So if some of the suspensions are based off of, I guess these collateral issues like skipping class or not attending or not doing homework or whatever they are, I mean, I think that would be more useful to look at how to prevent that type of behavior, when to intervene, how to intervene, so it doesn't get to a suspension.
Yeah, and I think to me, the part of what's happening in the district right now that is potentially hopeful is one, the strategic plan, which will give us more clear guidance and direction and ability to align to the overall plan for the district. I think, and within that plan are our MTSS efforts, multi-tiered system of supports. So as we build out structures and processes to look at data and to hopefully, continue to identify students who are struggling sooner, more effectively, we can have those levels of support. And of course, students who, like maybe the tier 1, 2, and 3 type data would help us, intervene sooner. I think another positive is we have, under Vince's leadership and others, we've implemented a social emotional screening instrument, K-12, that's called the SRSIE. That will help us further identify students. We have adopted a curricular resource, K-8, called Second called Second Steps. And one of our curriculum action teams is looking at what an appropriate high school social emotional curriculum would be. So I think as that comes to fruition and is implemented, that's a potential way to address some of these issues.
I think part of the work, to your question, so the way that the data is currently being collected, there's a term that's called discretionary discipline. And so the challenge with that, as we continue to unpack and put systems in place, is that when you code something, discretionary discipline, you can't clearly give you the data. So while I would love to give you that data, it's not very clear because it may say discretionary when you begin to think about what's needed. So if we were to say disrespectful speech and conduct, as we talk about our expectation code, I can clearly say 5 students were suspended because of disrespectful speech and conduct, and you can track over time the frequency of that. So when you're talking about Benita could get a suspension for skipping class, she could be suspended for being disrespectful, she could be suspended for a number of things.
So what you're looking for is patterns in the behavior, and am I being specific? The discipline is suspended, and then that way you can put the interventions in place. We are not there yet, but we are having those conversations.
I have two more questions too. One that also doesn't track the students that are not suspended at all or don't go through any disciplinary action for the same behaviors.
Right.
But two, are they looking at the IEPs when these suspensions are happening and seeing if they're being followed, and then if adjustments need to be made to those IEPs? Because my concern is that if you're suspending a student for something that is, like you were saying, a part of their disability, what are we doing to try to address that and accommodate that? And is the teacher even aware of what the IEP is requiring?
Sure. So, so teachers should be aware.
Should be.
Our special education case managers at the beginning of each year create profile sheets, which are digestible summaries, if you will, of what can be a 20, 30-page IEP document. But it does inform teachers, other staff members, of what kinds of supports that student needs, what kinds of accommodations and modifications should be afforded to those students.
Are they checking to make sure that, I have had to have this conversation previously about this is what the IEP says, and hey, that wasn't actually followed. So are they checking before the suspension happens to make sure the IEP was actually followed?
So that's work to be continued, and I will own that. So I think Lisa and I have been talking about how do we provide and opportunities for teachers to actually review. It's like a face sheet that tells you here are the accommodations and modifications, here's what you're supposed to do. And so last year we had some conversation about a knowing and doing gap, and then did facilitate professional development, because what we were wondering is, are you not doing it because you don't know how to implement a modified piece to whatever the student needs, or you're just not doing it? So I think there's still work there to be done, because sometimes people don't know what it looks like, particularly what a modification might look like, or an accommodation in a math class versus a science class. So I think there is work still with that. We are having conversations and planning around that, but that is an opportunity for us as a district.
Can I add to that? And I know we're just talking about IEPs and 504s are different, but not only knowing what's on those IEPs and the 504s, but not trying to convince students that they don't need what's on it. That students have to advocate, but for those kids that are not old enough to advocate verbally, then they're not, if they're being convinced that what's on those accommodations, the number of kids that I've had to coach to say, speak up.
Right.
Tell the teacher, no, it's on my 504, it's on my IEP, please let me have it.
Yeah.
So,
and we have done some work with our staff around supporting and encouraging our students to advocate for themselves. We can do more, but that is a big component when we think about self-advocacy, self-determination. That's something that we need to continue to work on.
I mean, I feel pretty strongly that middle school students and high school students, they shouldn't have to. They're pretty good at standing up for yourself. But what if you're an elementary school kid? Or what if you're an ECC learner? You're not going to have those skills yet.
True.
And Rachel, too, you know, my concern is, I agree with you, especially our kiddos are great advocates, but you have your Shire kiddos. There's also a stigma still with having an IEP, with, you know, having issues and not wanting to have to say to a teacher, but wait a minute, I'm not getting what I need or what I'm supposed to have. It can create isolation for that child. So I still, you know, my thing is, the teacher should know what the child needs, and we should all work together. It shouldn't just be on the teacher, but we all have to work together to make sure the kid is getting what they need. And yes, I want them to advocate for themselves, but if they don't, does that mean they don't get it? No, that's just not an option, right?
Right.
So, thank you.
And it needs to continue to be a partnership among all of us, special ed, general ed, et cetera, to ensure that our kids are getting what they need, what they deserve, you know, I'm a firm believer in what child psychologist Ross Green says, which is children do well if they can. And that belief system, if we believe that they will do well if they can, when they're not doing well, then it's on us to help them learn and do better. It's not on them, you know, because if we believe they will do well if they can, they're doing the best they can at the moment, even if that doesn't look like we would hope it would look. But the onus is on us as the educators to then help them.
So Ben, I know this is your final board meeting with us
Yes.
before you take on your next adventure, the School for the Deaf. But I'm wondering what wisdom you are leaving for, you know, your replacement and for potentially our MTSS coordinator as well. Where would you recommend we direct more attention? I mean, obviously, you know, we've sort of generally shared, you know, are there some action points that you would ask them to consider?
Sure. I think we need to the point that was made earlier, I think we need to continue to work to provide professional development on what accommodations and modifications look like, and make sure we put structures in place so when folks are unclear what those look like, there's a structure in place to help folks better understand. I think at the secondary level, we need to continue to work on our co-teaching structures. You know, when we have a special educator and a general educator in the same classroom, we need to make sure that they are maximizing their impact, because there are effective and less effective ways to co-teach. So that would be something. As part of the MTSS work, there has been talk about more consistent universal classroom supports or classroom management structures. And there's, I believe there's interest in that. Actually, was it a month or so ago, Dr. Olea, Dr. Jameson, SSD instructional coach, and some others were doing some initial walkthroughs to get kind of a baseline of where things are at ECC in preparation for moving forward. Because when we have universal structures in place that support all kids, it's going to benefit kids with IEPs and those without.
Yeah.
You know, and occasionally when a student is struggling and a special ed, you know, coach or someone comes in to help out, we see some opportunities for some additional structures that would support that student and, as a byproduct, support all students.
Can you talk to us about the final slide? I kind of hijacked your presentation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So this is taken from an SSD report that our research and evaluation department does on an annual basis. This is only fall 22-23 data. So it's just a snapshot, and actually our risk ratio ended up, even though we just acknowledged that it's not what it should be, compared to this fall semester data, we ended up better, if you will. I hate to say better because it's not better. But what this shows is the comparison of black students being suspended to other race groups. But what this is looking at is nearby districts within the county. So you can see of all the districts on here, at least at the fall, we were not in a good spot.
We were the highest.
This is not comforting, but you can see across the county, this is an issue. It is not unique to MRH, unfortunately. I mean, not unfortunately. It's an issue in most districts.
And some of these districts are larger than ours. Is that
Oh,
correct?
for sure.
So not only are we the highest in the neighboring districts, but we're the highest when we might have one of the lower populations.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, well, I'm not sorry to end on this slide, because it illustrates the urgency of the matter.
Yeah.
But it does point out that in education as a whole, we have significant work to do.
Right.
Well, Ben, I want to first be the first to say thank you for your time and partnering with me as I am concluding my second year, and also being willing to partner on the things that you mentioned. And I wish you a great deal of luck as you transition into the area that aligns closely with the experiences that you've had. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
You will definitely be very missed.
Yeah, you'll be missed, Ben.
Thank you. And I will miss MRH. This has been an amazing district to be a part of. There is a lot of great work going on. There are countless folks in MRH who are here for the right reasons and who are dedicated to our kids. So there is, in my opinion, there is reason to be hopeful for continued growth and more equitable outcomes for all kids.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben.
Our final admin communication item, board engagement opportunities, item 4.06.
So this particular item came from some of the feedback and continued conversation to have with the board around increasing engagement opportunities. So I want to start off with a bit of research that talks about the 8 characteristics of effective school boards, and pull out some words from this. I'm not going to read it, but the things that resonated from this as I think about the work that our board currently does is being collaborative, the relationship with staff and community, and then communication structures that currently exist for both internal and external stakeholders. This is not new research. It's been around for quite a bit and has also been presented to the board in previous presentations. So I was curious as to how community engagement was defined, but not defined in community engagement in other sectors, but defined specifically for school boards. So this particular definition came from Connecting with the Community, a 2018 published. For the purpose of policy, community engagement for boards of education is a process that the board uses to actively involve diverse citizens in dialogue, deliberation, and collaboration, thinking around common interests for the district schools. And so I want to go back to that term, common interest. So what are the benefits? I'll pull out a couple. Enhanced trust and communication between community members. That is a key piece, and that is work that we are still continuing to do. And one of the questions that came out during the public forum is accountability for the superintendent. This is actually one of my goals that has continued to roll from my first year. So part of listening and learning was around continuing to build community and how to do that so that everyone has a seat at the table and feels like they have an opportunity to engage. And the other piece that I want to pull out is improved problem solving and decision making in the process. So this was actually an interesting find in my research, and it's from the Illinois Association of School Boards, and it's been published in other places. It's called a public participation spectrum, and it really identifies how school boards are to participate and engage with the community. There are 4 ways identified: inform, consult, involve, and collaborate. And as you look at the spectrum, the way that you want to engage is actually through that collaboration and engagement. The informative piece is really merely giving information. So it lists the objectives there for all of them. But what I found interesting in the operational examples that they provided, they were quite monolithic, and they didn't necessarily demonstrate the expansive nature by which boards actually partner with the community. But a few that I want to highlight for inform, and I want to be very clear that the board designates to the superintendent and his or her cabinet that we are to inform communities. So the newsletters that come out, updated information provided by the communications department is an example of that, in addition to the website open houses and things of that nature. So you'll find that for consulting, public comment is an example of that, focus groups. An example of such would be what occurred during the strategic planning process, surveys that go out, and then also public meetings that take place. And then involved, you see there are workshops and deliberative polling. We have not done much of that, but there are opportunities for individuals to engage with the board. And the piece that I will be focusing my time on tonight is around the collaborative engagement piece, which our community is indicating that they want. And so what you see as citizen advisory committees is what's identified here through this particular spectrum, and then also participatory decision making. So how do our board currently engage? And I will tell you that it's expansive, and I've been in many districts, and the level of engagement of our board is much more than I've seen in years. So one way is set aside for time for public comment. That's open, anyone can come, again, as the policy indicated for BDDH. Adding action items is for residents. Public comment also includes citizens. Board meetings, this is an example of a way that the board engages. This is the board meeting, it's for forward-facing for community. For those who are curious about board briefs, this actually came back from feedback from a community member who indicated that they do not want to watch the board meetings, they don't have time to attend, but they still want the information. So the board briefs is in response to a request from a community member. That information is provided. Thank you, Mr. Ed Rich. Process for placing items on the board agenda meeting. So we talked a little bit about that tonight. BDDH is not a new policy. Again, it's being revised as a result of changes in the state statutes. We provide surveys to community, public submission of written feedback, and so that was one of the things I wanted to come back to that came back in the feedback. The board actually responds to emails. They also respond to letters. They also take phone calls. They also walk alongside the superintendent with the snacks with the soup. And they also meet in individual meetings at the request of community members alongside of the superintendent. They are very present during district and school events. That's more informal, but the community still has access. Again, snacks with the soups, and then those one-on-one meetings.
Can we remind everyone though that with the meetings, et cetera, we cannot speak outside of being a group, right? It is a unified process.
So for example, you can have a one-on-one with the board, but the board speaks as a unit, so all 7. So if you email a board member, you may see the board president respond, or you may see the full collective board actually included on that communique as well. Thank you for that.
And also, just kind of following up this, because I know that there, at least from the public comments, there have been some people upset with how the board responds to emails and to inquiries, and what will eventually happen to all of the public comments. We're not allowed to get into specifics about why people left. We can't give you those details, and all we can do is reiterate the policy of the board. So it's not that we're ignoring you or not taking your concerns seriously, it's just we can't gossip.
Yeah.
So I titled this side, Closing the Gap and Recommended Engagement Efforts. So let me be very clear, this is not a new conversation. The board and I have been having conversations to ensure that all of our community members are being heard, and not just a small population, as we talk about our equity work. So one of the events actually came back from feedback from community. They wanted drop-in hours with members of the board. So what I have titled Community, and so I wanted to align this with the spectrum that was shown. That would be an example of a consult. Other opportunities, town hall meetings, those days have already been identified by the board. So there are 2, one in the fall that will occur, one in the spring, and the process and the way that that will actually take place will be communicated out to our stakeholders. School liaison, so this was a new one that I actually gathered from observing as a part of my learning, another superintendent facilitating their board leadership retreat. And while my board, they love being at all of the events, but they also are not paid for their duties. So one of the things I am recommending is that we strategically look at assigning school board members as liaisons to our buildings, so that if there are concerns about a specific building, the community knows which board members, and then that information is communicated out. I'm still working on the procedure and structure to present to the board for feedback to react to, but that also lightens the load for board members not trying to be at all of the school events. So again, this is a recommendation that's coming forward. The board will provide me feedback in regards to that. Another piece that's being recommended is adding community members to the strategic planning, what I'm calling management oversight team meetings. For example, Mr. Crater has a level of expertise that he could actually include as a part of the for our resources, and so information and eliciting individuals who have a level of expertise who want to be involved. So one of the recommendations for the board was to have a climate and culture task force that fits nicely in for our people, and Dr. Shonda Ambrose Phillips will be the person to lead that and pulling community members in to actually be a part of that work. And then a couple other pieces aren't necessarily face-to-face opportunities, but looking at producing community engagement reports. And so again, part of my work is to research and provide the board with the best information to make decisions and to report out how we're doing for community engagement. So for example, Mr. Ed Rich, when we had open house, presented information to the board around how many participants, how many were in district, how many were not, and also what changes we would make as a result of that. So that information will continue to go, but we need to identify which community engagement events we will actually report out on, and that will be an informational piece, and then creating and disseminating the Board of Education engagement plan to inform the community. So once I receive feedback from the board, that will be codified and represented, and if approved, that will be the information that's posted on the website and also communicated with the public. And then the other piece is looking at and addressing some of the misinformation that's in community. So the district currently has structures to engage teachers. So in addition to my post checks, my end of year rounding, we have teacher leader forum. Those happen monthly. And the union reps and also the building leaders are a part of that, and the agendas capture the concerns that they bring forward, the administration address what information is there, and then also take back. But the piece of that is we have to diminish this idea of mistrust. So by potentially adding a board member to that particular piece, while they won't be a part of those conversations, they can hear the concerns that are coming out from teachers and also hear the administrators' responses to that. And lastly is looking at how to use current structures with MSTA and NEA around teacher engagement sessions. So currently, both of our teacher unions meet with staff at the beginning of the year, so versus adding yet another meeting for my board to attend, they will walk alongside those union members to actually engage and listen and hear from our staff. So those are some recommended engagement efforts that I'm presenting to the board. Again, open to looking and hearing for feedback in the ones that are being recommended. Here is my what's next. So once I conclude this slide, the board will tell me, yes, I like it. Please go back and make some adjustments. But it's to collaborate with the board to consider what I've presented, to make modifications to improve effectiveness. And then the last piece is to determine whether any current initiatives that are taking place need to be tweaked or modified as a result of feedback from our community. That is what I have for the board tonight. What questions might you have?
Thank you for putting that together.
Yeah.
What we have.
I think that's a good start, and then of course we can tweak things as they prove beneficial or not beneficial.
Yeah, I'm also, I don't have any issue with any of these suggestions. I do have concerns about our ability to sustain this level of energy. Again, I do appreciate that there are 7 of us, so there's plenty of opportunity for shared responsibility here, but I also don't want to set expectations that we can't consistently come through with. So I'm wondering if there are maybe 1 or 2 items to implement and see how those start to go. Because again, this isn't the only list of things we would be doing for community engagement. We've got all the stuff that we have been doing to add to. And maybe there are things on what we have been doing that we need to consider, ending or pausing in order to try some new things. But again, everyone, parents, students, teachers, board members have finite energy. So
wonder, Katie, about connecting some of this to our existing committee structure as a way to take up some of that slack. Because we're already in committee meetings that maybe determine are not as high value as some of these opportunities.
One of the things that I'm working to codify and Ms. Norton and I meet is looking at the strategic plan and our priority areas to say, of the committees that we have, how do these align so that we're not adding new committees? And then with the management oversight team meetings, we can then have a board member to do that and then eliminate some of the committees. I'm not yet done with structuring those based on the current board responsibilities as Katie shared. If I had to pick one or two that I think would be high leverage, I would say the town hall meetings, because they're only twice a year, would be one. And the other, I would say that would be an added lift. Some of those are things that I would do for the board to kind of monitor that. But the other piece that I would probably say would be the strategic planning around the management oversight teams, because that's already the work that we're doing. And so once we streamline versus adding yet another committee, we would just look at what's folding into those areas.
I would advocate for some additional consideration around allowing board members to be in spaces with teachers. I think that shows that we're responsive to some of the feedback that came forward today, particularly representation on teacher leader forum and participating in those union rep meetings.
And how does that align with like our existing presence on CBTF or the like?
Right. We have two people on CBTF right now, don't
We have one.
we? Oh,
current.
we had two. Well, we haven't made new assignments with our new board
I
members.
don't want to
who
give
are-
Rachel any more committees.
Well, thank you. This is a great way to start this conversation and make some decisions. Okay. Chris?
Oh, yeah. Ask before we jump in for the members of my cabinet who are sitting in the back. Is it okay for me to release those individuals in the back? I mean, you can stay if you want. I'm mindful of the hour, so I just wanted to make the ask of the board.
Yeah, he has to wait for action items. Yeah, I mean, I think obviously folks got stuff to do in the morning for the district.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Vince is like, I don't know.
This is like a dance marathon. We're going to stay.
All right.
All right, Mr. Holzer, you know your assignment here.
You betcha. Here we go.
It's a dance marathon.
86% of our revenue is locally generated, either from property taxes, collections, or programs like before and after care, Discover Club, and preschool. Collections on our operations side are about $23.5 million, about right around 97% collected. So we're going to reach our revenue targets, just about reach our revenue targets. We're going to be pretty close on everything this year. More about that at the end of the month. On our expenditures, 76% are allocated to our human resource, our greatest asset here at the district. You can see the distribution of the other categories. Expenditures, 76% are devoted to salaries, obviously. This is the distribution. Overall, we're right at 21 million, or 81.7% of the budget. So if you look at the percent collected and the percent expended, I expect that we will outperform the budget. I'm not yet sure to the extent that we will, but we will definitely beat the budget. And we're budgeting a 44% fund balance as a percentage of expenditures. At the end of the year, I do expect this number to move as well. What are your questions? How'd I do?
Great. Thank you.
Karen.
Quickly, with board communications, we do not have any committee reports, but I did want to inform my colleagues that I participated in the St. Louis Regional Professional Learning Community biannual meeting the day after school ended on June 3rd. That was at Afton. We had representatives from many, many school districts across the region. This is a meeting that occurs when the organizers can make it happen. What came out of that obviously was a lot of conversation about the 3 key areas of concern and interest for regional school districts. Those are our state legislature, student social and emotional support, and teacher retention. Those were the sort of unanimous topics of concern and focus in our conversations. One thing that I want to lift up is that a suggestion was made, because this meeting is not as frequent as it needs to be to support our learning from other districts, that this become a monthly Zoom meeting for those who wish to participate. Additionally, it was suggested that board presidents participate in a second monthly meeting. So if that happens, I'll go do that one, you all go do the other one, because I do see a lot of opportunity in board presidents meeting regularly in our region. This may also absorb the legislative meetings that are being hosted by Webster during the session, to absorb that. So maybe we'll remove some meetings off of our calendars.
I also don't have a report on SSD, but I did attend the meeting, and we have a new rep, Carmen Staten, so excited to see how that goes. It was also a long meeting.
Yes, it was.
Calendar events, I think the thing most important to call to your attention is our retreat on July 15th. Let's move into action items. 7.01, construction change orders.
Move to approve construction change orders as presented.
Second.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you, Rachel. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 7.02, water service line installation contract award.
Move to approve the water service line connections by Merlot Plumbing in the amount of $164,394 as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 7.03, strategic plan.
The administration recommends, and I so move, to adopt the strategic plan as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 7.04, bus routes.
Move to reapprove the 2022-2023 bus routes as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 7.05, student activities.
I move to approve the addition of athletic programs to the high school as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Welcome, MRH to U City. 7.06, 2023A policy batch.
Move to approve policies BDDB, IGCD, IGCDA, and JECA as presented by MSBA in the 2023A policy batch.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 7.07, executive session.
I move to enter executive session in accordance with section 610.021, subsections 1, 3, 9, and 13, and section 610.022 of the revised status of Missouri, June 15, 2023, for the following specific reasons: personnel matters, legal matters.
Roll call vote?
Yes, second.
Oh, I'm sorry. Really jumping ahead. Can I get a
Ms. Goldsmith?
Yes.
Ms. Martinez?
Yes.
Ms. Kaufman?
Yes.
Ms. Robinson?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Herndon?
Yes.
Ms. Whitman?
yes? All right. Meeting adjourned. 10:32. We'll move into executive session after a bathroom break.
Right.
Thank you all for
Thank you
staying.
guys for staying.
Thank you so much.